Hi everyone, my name is Pascal Castonguay. I'm the coordinator of Réseau National d'Expertise en troubles du spectre de l'autisme, pardon me. That translates into National Network of Expertise in Autism Spectrum Disorder. I'm the coordinator, and today I'm happy to welcome you to the conference, the ABCs of AAC, How to Get Started with Augmentative and Alternative Communication. It's an activity in partnership with Sonderly. So Laura, you can present yourself.
Thank you, Pascal. Welcome, everyone. I am a learning specialist at Sonderly, the training division of the Geneva Center for Autism. Sonderly is a professional development platform supporting inclusive learning. We offer courses for educators and professionals seeking to learn more about neurodiversity, autism, and mental health. We at Sonderly believe in offering current, practical, evidence-based learning materials to ensure that you receive the most relevant and effective training available. This webinar on AACs helps us in our mission to build community skills to better support and accept neurodiversity.
So RNA-TSA's mission is to organize knowledge transfer at the activities at the cutting edge of evidence-based data on autism, to promote dialogue and the creation of links between researchers, practitioners, autistic people, and their families. We offer activities and documents for different activity sectors, so health and social services, education, and daycare. We have more than 2,700 members, which over 700 of them participate in virtual practice sharing communities on Facebook. Our website contains over 150 free documents, so you can go and have a look. And for more information, visit our website at www.rnetsa.ca and become a member, so you'll get an email every 2 weeks, and then follow us on Facebook. And get your agendas out right now. Our two next activities are on October 11. It will be a webinar on domestic violence in the autism setting, and we have a full day of conferences on November 2nd on inclusive education. The presentation outline for today, it will be a 2.5-hour conference, and we have 2 10-minute break. And then after that, there will be a 15-minute testimonial. I want to thank the participant in the testimonial. So Ilona, our 15-year-old, who uses AAC, her mother, Mrs. Asanan, Pascal Robbins, Gail Lord, Clinic Spectrum, and Giant Steps School. After that, there will be a 30-minute questions, Q&A sessions with our presenters, and finally, closing remarks.
I would now like to present our two speakers, Amanda Cox and Pamela Miller. Amanda is an Australian-trained speech-language pathologist with 13 years experience in the field. She graduated with a Bachelor of Applied Science, Speech Pathology, from the University of Sydney and obtained a postgraduate certificate in Autism Studies from Griffith University. Amanda moved to Canada from Australia in 2016 for a working holiday and loved it so much that she became a resident and has lived here ever since. She has worked in Sydney, Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto, where she currently lives with her partner and 2-year-old daughter. She has worked in a variety of settings, including schools, children's hospitals, private practice, and early intervention centers. She has a passion for AAC and believes strongly in play-based intervention and parent coaching. Pamela is a speech-language pathologist with 11 years of experience. She graduated from McGill University with a double major in psychology and linguistics and completed her master's in speech-language pathology from the University of Alberta. Pamela has worked in both Montreal and Toronto with children in a variety of areas, including AAC, stuttering, language disorders, and childhood apraxia of speech. Her focus in the past few years has been in AAC, working with both direct and indirect assessors and supporting communication partners on how to integrate AAC into their daily lives. So without further ado, I wish you all a great webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda, and this is my colleague Pam, and welcome to our webinar on the ABCs of AAC, how to get started with augmentative and alternative communication. So here's our agenda for today. Our presentation today will be around 3 hours long. We'll have 2 short breaks and 3 activities. This webinar is pre-recorded. However, we will be joining live at the conclusion of the presentation to answer any questions that you might have. Please put questions in the chat of the Zoom throughout the presentation, and we will address them at the end of the recording. Just some disclaimers before we get started. So this workshop is for educational purposes only, and we will not be providing specific client advice. This workshop is not to be in place of professional consultation with an AAC professional. We know that in this field, language is continually changing, and people have their own preferences of how they want to speak about themselves or how they want to refer to others. During this presentation, we will use terms such as autistic individual or individuals with autism interchangeably. Today, we will often interchange the terms of user and child. We are focusing today a lot of strategies for kids, but these strategies for augmentative communication can be used for people across all ages. Just a financial disclaimer, Pam and myself are paid for this workshop by Retzer and Sondley as independent private speech pathologists. Just a language disclaimer, myself and Pam are English-speaking speech pathologists. We are currently registered and work in Ontario. We are not French speakers, and this presentation was created and presented in English and then translated into French by Retzer. Really, our main agenda today is introduce everyone to AAC and how to get started. Pam and myself are both really passionate about AAC and coaching communication partners to support AAC users. When Pam and I work with families, we really hope to make introducing AAC approachable and not so intimidating and fun. And we really hope to be able to pass on some of this information to you all today.
So we're really happy that you're able to join us today. So our plan for today is to review some myths and facts related to AAC, discuss who is a candidate for AAC and how to get started. We want to look at the importance of introducing a robust AAC system and spend some time reviewing strategies to support the use of AAC in different environments, including in the classroom. We'll also explore some common challenges that come up and discuss some problem-solving strategies. And then most importantly, we'll focus on ensuring that the introduction and implementation of AAC is positive and fun for everyone involved. So what is AAC? AAC is short for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So this includes communication devices, tools, strategies that we may use to replace or support natural verbal speech. There are a wide range of people who can utilize AAC, and it's not just for individuals who don't speak. So some examples of AAC users might be a child who hasn't started talking yet, an individual who's lost their ability to speak due to illness or disability, a child with selective mutism whose speech comes and goes, or maybe a child that speaks, but their speech is very hard to understand. Speech is a complex skill, and AAC can help individuals get their message across to all listeners when speech is either absent or difficult to understand. So there are 2 main types of AAC. There's aided and unaided. So unaided AAC includes things like gestures, body language, signs, and facial expressions. And it's also a big part of neurotypical communication. So even as adults who use speech as our primary mode of communication, we still use unaided AAC to augment our speech to get our message across. So an example of this is an adult putting up a finger to signal to someone, like if they need a minute, if they're on the phone. And if someone were to do that, we'd fully understand without them needing to say anything. Aided AAC involves tools or materials to support communication. So aided communication can involve both high-tech or low-tech strategies. And some examples include specific speech-generating devices, communication books, keyboard or alphabet charts, or it could be an iPad with AAC apps. Similar to unaided AAC, as neurotypical speaking adults, we also use aided AAC to supplement our speech. So for example, this could be like texting or typing on a keyboard, drawing something, or even just pointing to pictures on a menu when you're ordering. So those are all aided AAC tools that we use every day. We're going to give some specific examples of low and high-tech AAC tools shortly, but we do want to highlight that there is no one superior type of AAC. So it's not low-tech and then high-tech. You don't have to master low-tech before moving to high-tech. And for many individuals, low-tech may be the better option. AAC includes both symbols and photos as well as text. And I just want to be clear that this differs from visual supports that may support a child's receptive language or understanding of a situation, like a visual schedule. While these are very important tools when working with children on the spectrum, it's not going to be our focus for today. During today's presentation, we won't be recommending a specific type of AAC, as one is not better than the other. It very much depends on the wants and needs of the child and family. So if you think AAC may be right for your child or a child that you work with, we'd recommend speaking to an SLP for a complete AAC assessment. They will be the ones who will be able to best guide you as to which system or tool may work best for your family.
So today we've been asked to present about using AAC with autistic individuals. We want to highlight that we know that autism is a spectrum disorder and that every autistic individual is different and unique. There is no across-the-board recommendations for AAC with individuals on the spectrum, and AAC needs to be tailored specifically to each individual's unique skills and needs. Research does show us that AAC has been found to be a very effective intervention for autistic individuals. We know that a high percentage of autistic individuals have apraxia, which is a motor speech impairment that might make verbal speech very difficult. And some research shows us that even after early intervention, up to 30% of autistic individuals may still be minimally verbal. Therefore, introduction of robust AAC is important in providing access to communication for autistic individuals. The AAC community is learning more and more about how to best support AAC users from autistic individuals themselves who use AAC. There is a paper by Donaldson and McCoy in 2021, and we'll put the reference at the end of the presentation, which studied adult AAC users, adult autistic AAC users and their experiences. The paper includes a wide variety of quotes from autistic individuals, which helps to shape our understanding of how best to support introduction of AAC. So in this study, one AAC user was quoted to say, "I was in speech therapy through a segregated special education program until I was 10. My speech was exhausting and it didn't feel natural. I did it because it was the only thing people would respond to. It was really tiring to speak a lot, and I couldn't access all of the words in my head and make them come out of my mouth. I would have frequent periods where speech would not work or not work properly. I learned to outwardly appear to speak well because there was a lot of social pressure to do so, but I was frequently being forced to speak when it was difficult." Another AAC user in this study said, "I love multimodal communication. My brain loves it. It is so much easier to communicate with multimodal communication. It is hard to try to force myself to use one communication method when I can use multiple. Life is easier with multiple. Different methods have different advantages." So it is really important to hear from AAC users and their experiences so that we can better support them and also include them in the AAC assessment and intervention process. We will be hearing from more AAC users today in testimonials provided by RETSA.
So the main focus of AAC is to give the user the ability to communicate anything they want to whoever they want, whenever they want, and however they want. We want them to have the same access to language as a verbal communicator. So we typically decide to introduce AAC when verbal speech is not meeting a child's communication needs, meaning they have more to communicate than they're able to say. It's therefore really important that the tool that we give them has the ability for them to generate their own ideas and utterances.
Okay, so the next few slides we're going to go over are some examples of some different AAC systems. So we're going to talk about some low-tech displays, some mid-tech displays, and some high-tech displays. This isn't a comprehensive list. This isn't every single AAC system in existence. This is just some of the more common ones that we see. And like Pam said, we will not be recommending one over the other. So just some examples here. So we have some low-tech displays. So low-tech just means no technology involved. It's a paper-based system, typically. Up the top, we have a flip and talk, which includes a core vocabulary display and a flip row at the top, which has specific categories. So this particular display can be customized and it can be based off any language system. Flip and talks are really great because you can navigate through the top fringe rows while always having access to the core vocabulary, and they're very highly customized. Again, up the top, we have a different type of communication display, and this is called a POD, which stands for Pragmatic Organization Dynamic Display. A POD is a communication book, and it's a very specific program that's based off pragmatic branches. So we start with the reason to communicate, and then as you go through the book, it becomes more specific about things that people would want to talk about. Down the bottom, we have a core board. So down the bottom left is an example of a core board. If you work in a school, you might have seen one of these before, or one that looks like this, or one that looks different to this. There are many different types of core vocabulary boards and displays. And at the end of the presentation, we will share a resource list and talk you through how you can create your own core boards, or how you can find a variety of different core boards with different symbols. And down the bottom right, we have a letter board. So for kids who are literate and can spell out words, access to the alphabet is also really important. The alphabet does count as symbols and is a way that we can give kids access to say whatever they want to say with the alphabet. We also want to highlight that PECS is also a low-tech system that we don't have pictured here. But PECS stands for Picture Exchange Communication System. It is a good system to learn how to request. However, we don't personally use it very often in our clinical practice, as it doesn't provide access to lots of robust vocabulary, which is going to be our focus for today. And we will speak about this a little bit later on. So here we have some medium tech displays. So they're not low tech, but they're not high tech. Medium tech devices are battery operated or simple electronic devices that can provide a recorded voice output message. These can be single messages devices like the Big Mac, which is the one up the big red button up the top, which you can record a message on, or a static display like the Go Talk, which is down the bottom, which can have symbols in a static display. This means that when you press a button, it will speak that single word, but it won't necessarily lead to a new page like a dynamic display would on an iPad. Big Macs, so the big red button up the top, can be used in circle time. They can be used to record a repetitive line of a book. You could do it in a shared reading activity together. So, for example, you could record your voice on the button saying, "What do you see?" And then you could read Brown Bear, the book Brown Bear, and get the child to push the button to say, "What do you see?" as the repetitive line in that book. The big yellow button up the top is called a step-by-step, and step-by-steps are pretty great because they can have sequential messages recorded on them. So it's different every time it's activated. These can be used for independent participation in an activity, such as recording a different verse of everyone's favorite song. So like Baby Shark, every time that they hit it, it might play the next verse of Baby Shark, or it also could also tell jokes. So the first time it's hit, it says the joke, and then the next time it might say the answer to the joke. And down the bottom, with the multiple buttons, we have an iTalk 2 or an iTalk 4. This is great because it is used to give access to different words. So it can be used to make a choice between two toys, or maybe a choice between more and all done. So these type of devices, sorry, Pam, these type of medium tech displays are really great for kids who might have difficulties with access, who might have difficulties using their hands to access a big display like an iPad, which we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about kids who might have difficulties accessing devices and need alternative access towards the end of the presentation today. Okay, so here we have some high-tech programs. So we have some examples of some high-tech AAC apps that are available on an iPad. Now, an iPad is not the only high-tech system that we have available, but it is a very common one. So some of these more common AAC apps that we might see. So at the top row, we have Proloquo to Go, which is a very, very common app that you might see a lot when you work in schools. We have Touch Chat with Word Power up the top middle. We have LAMP, which stands for Language Acquisition Through Motor Planning. We have TD Snap. We have Go Talk Now, and we have Talk Tablet. And we also have Cough Drop. So not one of these is better than the other. There are all pros and cons to each one of these, and they all have slightly different layouts. The one thing that they do all have in common is it gives a communication partner access to voice output and access to a robust communication system to be able to communicate about a variety of topics for a variety of different reasons. And just some examples of some other hardware systems. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just to give you an idea of some other systems that are out there besides an iPad, although we have included a symbol of an iPad there as well because they are so common. So I guess the iPads we do see, they're very common because they're very affordable. So we get to see them a lot, but there are other high-tech options. So up the top, we have a NovaChat, which is a dedicated speech device which supports touch chat vocabulary. The difference between this and an iPad is the NovaChat has a handle, it's got an inbuilt speaker, it's a dedicated speech device. There is nothing else that is on the device. Down the bottom, we have an Accent 1000. So again, similar to a NovaChat, it has a handle, it has a built-in speaker, it can connect to a computer, and this particular device supports LAMP and Unity vocabulary, and Unity and LAMP are quite similar. And down the bottom right, we have a Tobii i13, which is a Tobii Dynavox software. So this particular device is an eye gaze system. So for a child who can't use their hands and they might be using their eyes to select different symbols. Tobii Dynavox also do have devices for kids who use their hands to point as well. So lots of different options. These are just some options. It's not every single device that's out there, but these are some of the more common ones that we see. And it really depends on, they range in price. They also range with slightly different features and pros and cons to all of them. So if you want to learn more about these particular hardware and software, it's best to speak to your speech pathologist and your multidisciplinary team that works with your child. So given all of those symbols that we've just seen, there's a lot of different displays, there's a lot of different symbols. So what symbols do we use? All systems have slightly different symbols with pros and cons. And there is no best symbol set. So some systems have symbols that include a single meaning. So for example, in an app like Proloquo to Go or TD Snap, they have one symbol that has one meaning. So eat means eat. And some apps like LAMP have multiple symbol meanings. So you might have a button for put, and that button for put will have words of things that you can put something in, so like suitcase and a backpack. And you might also have verbs related to what we might do with those nouns, so like open, keep, shut. The downside to the multiple symbol meanings is that sometimes families we work with might find this a little bit overwhelming to start with. The positive of multiple symbol meanings is it's less navigating. There's more symbols that are displayed on the homepage, so there's less button pushes to find what you need. There is no evidence to support a symbol hierarchy of starting with photos or objects and moving to more abstract symbols. This has been a recent change, I guess, in the last few years. When I was studying at university, we were taught that you had to start with objects and then move up the hierarchy before you got to more abstract symbols. The problem with this is that it's very slow, and it's asking the AAC users to relearn as they master a level. And again, it becomes a test to earn new words. Like once you get good at this level, you move up to the next level. Also, if we're just using objects and photos, it's very limiting to the user to just use nouns. It means they don't have access to robust communication, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So there's no need to limit ourselves to an AAC system with a new user that would just be able to manage objects or photos. There is also no need to limit AAC users in the amount of symbols that we expose them to. We don't need to get AAC users to master the word apple before we introduce the symbol for banana, because this is not how we typically learn language, and it's not how we would teach verbal children either. So can you imagine speaking to a neurotypical toddler or a baby by only saying apple to them for their whole life, and then once they start saying apple, then we might say apple and banana to them. And then once they learn apple and banana, then we might say apple, banana, and pear. That's not how we learn language. So we don't want to introduce symbols like that to AAC users in a +1 way. We don't want kids to have to earn their words. Even if symbols are abstract, kids can learn them. Speech itself is very abstract. It's a random string of sounds and we create meaning to it. We say this because we very often have teams and families say to us, can we change this button? We don't like the look of it. It's too abstract. But kids can learn them, and we see them do it all the time. It's repetition and adding intention to these symbols is how the kids are going to use it. Sorry. And when we are choosing symbol sets, we also want to, again, I'm saying kids, but this is all users. We do let the kids lead the way with this when they're choosing what symbols that they like. Sometimes clinically, we introduce kids to a variety of different devices or a variety of different apps and symbol sets. And everybody has their own bias about what they think might work for a child. Everybody has apps that they prefer or that they know better over others. But it's really up to the kid on what they prefer, and they will lead the way in showing us this. You know, I saw a kid the other week, and myself and the team thought that LAMP would be the best option for this child. But on the trial device, they kept getting out of LAMP and going straight into touch chat. So anytime we tried to show them, it would be straight back into touch chat. That was their very strong preference. So when we started going with that and started introducing touch chat more, he flew with that and did really well. So we need to respect AAC users' preferences and follow their lead about which symbols they like best.
So motor planning is a skill that allows us to remember and perform specific steps to complete an activity more efficiently. So we use motor planning in many everyday tasks, from brushing our teeth to driving. So if you think about when you learned to drive, there were so many steps you needed to remember. So putting on your seatbelt, turning on the car, adjusting the mirrors. And after doing the same thing over and over, you no longer think about all these steps, and you may not even realize that you're doing them. So some apps use motor planning to increase a user's efficiency to navigate and to find specific buttons. So that would mean the button is in the same place all the time. So the user is no longer scanning to find a specific button. Their hand just knows exactly where to go, kind of like when you're typing. Sometimes it may be multiple hits to get to a button. And this can sometimes be thought of the same way that a word has multiple syllables. So if you think of the word animal, it's only a word because we combined animal together. So to find a specific button, it may be 3 hits to get to it, but the same way that we learned that animal go together to make the word animal, a child can also remember that this pattern of 3 hits makes the word animal. Because we rely so heavily on motor planning aspect to learn a new system, we need to be sure that when we add new words, we're preserving the motor memory that they've already learned. So oftentimes we see technology introduced with a small grid size, and then educators may increase the grid size to add more words as the user becomes more proficient. And although at first this seems like a good idea, like starting small and then as they get better, making it bigger and bigger, we're actually making their lives harder because every time we do this, they need to relearn where to find the buttons. So a good example of this is if I took your phone and I moved around some of your apps. So your texting button is where your internet button was, your emails where your phone was. Your motor plan is so strong that every time you open your phone to text, your thumb would automatically go to the wrong place for the first few times until you get used to it. So how do we get around this? we start with the largest grid size possible that they're able to access. So that's based on their vision and their fine motor skills. So if they're able to access a grid with 50 or 80 buttons, then that's where we'd want to start. While we do understand that this may be too visually overwhelming for a new user, a great strategy is then masking or hiding some of the buttons so that maybe they can only see 20 at first. But every time we unhide a button and add it to their list, we're keeping the same grid size, so nothing's moved. We've preserved the motor memory that they've already worked really hard on. On that note, though, some kids do benefit from masking, but we'll talk a bit more about that when we get into vocabulary a little bit later. The last thing I'll mention is about homophones. And if you're like me and you get confused between all those words, a homophone is the two words that sound the same but may be spelled differently. So for example, not, like that's not correct, and not, so tie a knot. In order to preserve motor memory, many homophones are listed only once in a device. This means, for example, that the word orange may only be listed on the color page and not the fruit page, but the symbol would still be represented by an orange, for example. This is also because as verbal speakers, we have one word that we say for these pairs. So when we're referring to the color and the fruit, we go to the same place in our brain to retrieve that word. So some programs like LAMP try to preserve this by having AAC users only have to go to one place on their device as well. And sometimes that seems like it makes less sense because it's represented by a symbol, which makes it really clear that we're talking about, you know, the fruit or the color. But we have to remember the symbol, like Amanda explained, isn't that important because the end goal is to have the user use motor memory to locate the word and not have them scanning the different symbols. So I'm going to go through some common questions that we often come across in the field of AAC. And this will hopefully address some hesitations that you may have when deciding if AAC is right for your child or client. So what if they don't understand cause and effect? AAC can actually be used to teach cause and effect. So if we take, for example, the Big Mac that was mentioned earlier, it's the single button that can have a recorded message. So if a child loves Cheerios, for example, you can record Cheerios on the Big Mac, and then every time they push it, it would say Cheerios. So when the child activates the button, even if it's by mistake, we'd respond as if the child said Cheerios themselves. So, oh, you want Cheerios? Of course. And then we would give them a Cheerio. So they're learning that when they activate the button, it says Cheerio, and then they immediately get a Cheerio. So they're learning cause and effect and how to use an AAC device at the same time. What if they're too young? So the evidence doesn't show that there's a minimum age requirement, nor is there any research that you need to have a certain amount of oral language intervention before beginning AAC. So clinically, I've worked with children as young as 18 months introducing AAC. And even in some mommy and me groups, they're introducing baby sign with children much earlier than that. And that's also a type of AAC. What if they don't understand enough language? So there's actually no minimum amount of language a child needs to understand to start to be exposed to AAC. So if you think about it, we start speaking to babies the day they're born, or even before they're born. We know that they don't understand what we're saying, but it doesn't stop us. We know that that's how they're going to learn. And if we think of AAC as another language, it can also be introduced early on with no receptive language prerequisite. So what if they aren't interested in communicating? So you often hear families say that their child isn't interested in communicating, so there's no point in introducing AAC. It's very possible that spoken language is just too complex for them. And once we show them an alternative way of communicating that will get them exactly what they want, they may be more motivated in trying. Once they see how magical language and communication is, they may even be more motivated to try and communicate verbally as well. As an aside, I try to always link back to what we would do with a verbal child. And this is going to come up quite a few times during the presentation. So if we had a verbal child who we felt maybe wasn't interested in communicating, it wouldn't stop us from communicating with them. So nothing should stop us from trying to communicate with a nonverbal child either. So what if they have some behaviors? We often see children with behaviors and are told that there isn't really a point in introducing anything because they'll just throw it or they may break it. The reason I put behavior in quotations is because we need to remember that behavior just equals communication. For a nonverbal child, the only way they have to effectively tell you that they don't want something is to throw it. If they had the words to tell you that they didn't want it, they'd probably use that instead. So their end goal is not to throw and break an iPad. If they're demonstrating behaviors, if they're throwing things, chances are they're just trying to communicate in the only way that they know how. So, for example, if a nonverbal child is watching a show on an iPad and they decide they want to watch a different show, there's a chance they may throw it because it's playing a show that they no longer want to watch. But if we're able to show them a more effective way to communicate, so maybe just pointing to a symbol that says something different or all done, and they can use that to show that they're tired of watching this show, they would probably do that instead because it's easier for everyone involved. So what if they already have some words? That's great if a child has already begun to speak. However, they may not have enough words yet to meet all their needs, and they may not be fully intelligible. So having access to an AAC can increase their vocabulary and help them be better understood. We see many clients who use AAC as a means to clarify or supplement their verbal speech, or AAC users who might only use their system short-term while they develop more verbal speech. Even as neurotypical adults who use speech as a primary mode of communication, we all use some AAC to supplement our speech. So we text, we type emails, we point, we gesture, we nod our heads. Nobody relies on just verbal speech alone. So if AAC can help them get a little bit further and make their lives a little bit easier today, then why not? What if they don't have good motor skills or they can't see or hear? So a child doesn't need to have strong fine motor skills or even be able to see or hear to introduce AAC. There's a lot of alternative ways that a child can access a system that don't require vision or isolating a finger, and we'll briefly get into that later on in the presentation. So will AAC stop my child from talking? So this is probably the most common question that we get from parents. And after years of research, we know that AAC will not hinder or stop further speech development. So there's actually some emerging evidence to the contrary that AAC can sometimes promote speech development, and it's certainly something that we often see in our clinical practice. So high-tech devices can provide consistent speech models, which sometimes then translate into verbal speech. In addition, the use of AAC allows for a child's language to grow and develop so that if they do begin to speak verbally, they already have that understanding of how to use language to communicate. Does my child have to do low-tech or PECs before starting a high-tech system? There's no evidence that proves that low-tech needs to be mastered before a high-tech system, and there's no evidence-based hierarchy about how to introduce a high-tech system. So there are pros and cons to each system, and for low-tech versus high-tech. So finding a system for a child depends more on their preference, their skills, and their needs, rather than needing to master one before moving on to the next. Many children we work with also have both. So they have a high-tech system and then a low-tech backup in case the high-tech stops working. Or if they're in an environment where it may be easier to use one or the other. So for example, a child with a high-tech system may have a waterproof low-tech board that they can use when they're swimming or when they're taking a bath. And does my child have to start with photos and then move on to pictures? No. So as Amanda mentioned, there is no research into a symbol hierarchy, and you can start off with whatever symbol makes sense for the user. So who is a candidate for AAC? Everyone. Everyone's a candidate for AAC. And not only that, but we're doing a disservice to anyone who we don't try to give access to. Definitely everything new we try is a challenge, but everyone deserves the chance to try it. AAC comes in so many different options, from low tech to high tech, from aided to unaided, from simple to complex. There's an option for everyone in every environment. And the most important is to always presume potential. If we spend our days teaching and speaking to children and they don't understand us, all we've done is treat them with respect. So there's no harm done. If we assume they don't understand and we don't even bother trying, then that's when we've caused irreparable damage. And AAC is absolutely not a last resort. And if there's one take-home message that you get from this presentation, we hope that this is it. So parents sometimes feel that their child will begin to speak, so there's no point, or children will become lazy and they'll use AAC rather than speech. Speech is the quickest and easiest way to communicate with others. And if a child is able to say the word, I promise you they will. It's way more laborious to find a word on an AAC system compared to just speaking it. And we all always choose the easiest, fastest, and most effective way to do anything. Even if you think of yourselves, there's probably times where you've been texting someone and it turns into a whole long thing and you decide you're just going to pick up the phone and call them because it's just easier than typing it. And that's coming from, people who probably prefer texting over phone calls and people who can type efficiently, but sometimes we still just pick up the phone because it's easier. So hopefully by now we've convinced you that everyone is a candidate for AAC. So how do we get started?
So where do we start? So once a robust system has been identified, we want to start by modeling use of the device. And by modeling, we just mean using the device ourselves as the communication partner to show AAC users how to use the symbols and what they mean. So the next part of this presentation, we're going to discuss some concrete strategies about how to introduce an AAC system once you've chosen one with a new user. So some of these strategies that we're going to discuss today is being able to speak AAC. So for a child to learn AAC, we need to speak AAC. To model motivating and routine-based vocabulary, modeling without expectations, allowing a user time to explore the device, following a user's lead, having AAC available at all times and in all environments, asking open-ended questions and not asking too many questions, using a mix of core and fringe vocabulary, and using robust vocabulary. So these are just some of the things that we're going to touch on in the next portion of the slide and give you some videos and some ways that you can implement this.
So I just want to do a quick little activity here. Here are 3 questions that have been created using AAC symbols. So I'd like you to take a couple minutes and come up with what you think they represent. So I'm not sure how many of you were able to decipher what these said, but what I am hoping to reinforce is that it's not obvious. So the first one actually says, where did you go during the holidays? The next one says, did you see any pandas at the zoo? And the third one says, do you want to play outside with me? So without the knowledge of what each symbol represents, we can't expect to be able to decipher what we're seeing. And so we definitely would not be able to use it to functionally communicate. So just because a child has access to all these words and symbols in a system, we can't expect them to just know how to use them. And that's why it's so important for us to model. So when learning any language, a child needs time to understand the meaning of a word before they will use it. So for verbal children, it's pretty straightforward. We speak to them and they're able to learn it and repeat back what they're hearing. For nonverbal children, we need to speak to them using AAC, and then they can learn it and eventually repeat AAC back to us as well. The challenge comes in when we use spoken language with our child, and then we expect them to process that and then somehow be able to communicate that using AAC. So before your child uses symbols to communicate, he or she must be given opportunities to understand the meaning of those symbols. So we often have parents tell us that their child understands spoken English, so they don't need to model and communicate with them using the AAC tool. So it's just for them the child to use to be able to communicate back to us. The challenge is that if we speak to a child verbally, we can't expect them to be able to spontaneously use a device in a meaningful way as soon as we hand it to them. That would basically be the same as me like handing you a foreign language dictionary and expecting you to be able to communicate in that language. You can't use a dictionary if you don't understand the language that it's written in. So AAC users need context and time to learn all the symbols and how they can be used. Therefore, when introducing AAC to a child, it's crucial that we speak to them in the same AAC language so that they can learn it and eventually repeat it back.
Okay, so we've just got a graphic here, just with a bit of a statistic about modelling. This is a very common graphic that if you've done an AAC workshop before, you might have seen, and it also does the rounds on social media as well, but it's a really important statistic. So it says here that by 18 months, babies have heard 4,380 hours of spoken language, yet we aren't really expecting them to speak yet. If an AAC user only sees symbols modelled by communication partners on a device weekly for 20 to 30 minutes, it would take 84 years for them to have the same exposure to aided language as an 18-month has to spoken language. So that's a very stark figure, but it really just shows us the importance of modelling and being able to model across all situations with all different people, and being able to do it as much as we possibly can with our AAC users. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break now, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about some concrete strategies about implementing AAC with new users, and we'll show you some videos as well of those strategies in play. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay. So we're going to start talking now about modelling without expectations. So what exactly does that look like? Essentially, it means using the device ourselves as the communication partner with no expectation that the child responds. We want to use statements that don't require a response. No expectations also means that we don't expect them to sit next to us really nicely and watch what buttons we're pressing. Just like in a typical interaction, we're not always sitting really nicely and observing the people that we're talking to. Or just like if you're speaking to a verbal child who's running away from you and choosing to ignore you, you will still speak to them. It's okay if they don't acknowledge you when we're first learning. We can keep going. So some ways that we can do this are commenting on what you're doing. So you might say things like, "You're watching Dora. I love Dora. You're building such a high tower." You might make a suggestion, such as, "Maybe we should go to the park." You might narrate what you're doing. So, "I'm folding clothes. I love these socks on you." We might describe what we see or what we hear in an environment. So, "Listen, I can hear the sirens," or "Look, there's a plane." We want to try to limit asking too many questions, as there is often an expectation to respond. So instead of saying, "What do you want to have for a snack?" you could say, "I wonder if you want yogurt or cookies for a snack. I think I want yogurt." And then you might go and get both items, and that then leaves an opportunity for the child to respond if they like, without creating a specific expectation for them to do so. We're not saying you can't ask questions ever, but we just want to limit the amount of questions that we're asking so that it doesn't become a constant test and answer kind of situation for a new user. Because remember that one of our big take homes today is we want to make it fun. We also want to use the device to speak to other kids. So if you are a family member and you're using a device at home, if an AAC user is in your house and using a device, then you might use the device to model and speak to other kids in the family, to your partner, to family members, to friends. We want to normalize it as much as possible in the environment and not just be when we're sitting down to do an activity. So we're going to watch a video now of this strategy in play. So before we watch this video, just a quick disclaimer. This video is not of an autistic client. We've created these videos to show strategies that us as the communication partners can do to support AAC users. This video is of a 2-year-old girl named Riley. Riley is actually my daughter, and she's neurotypical. Riley has been exposed to different communication modes from birth. So she's nearly about to turn 2. She's beginning to use some verbal speech, and she still uses a lot of baby sign and a lot of gestures. This video that we've taken here was the very first time that she was exposed to Proloquo to Go on an iPad. Just another disclaimer is that these videos are not perfect. We don't want them to be perfect. We've taped them to show modeling in an everyday environment. So it's in my house, it's in an everyday routine. She's having a mealtime. It's in a messy house, in a busy household. Riley's just come home from daycare. She's not in a good mood. Her hair's a mess. It's not a perfectly manicured situation. And we want that. We want to be able to show you that because modeling doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be sitting down at a table with a child perfectly attending to you in a nice lit house. So it's messy. Also, as the communication partners, we also don't do it perfectly every single time. Even myself and Pam, we do this for a living, and sometimes we make mistakes when we're implementing AAC with new users. But we want to highlight that because modeling doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to give it a go. So let's play the video, and then afterwards we'll talk about some of the strategies that we've seen.
Cucumber.
A cucumber and
Tomato.
some tomatoes. Yeah, what a good big bite.
Like.
You like the cucumber? Yeah.
Eat cheese sandwich, cucumber, tomato like.
Wow, what a good sentence. You're eating a cheese sandwich, cucumber and tomato, and you like it. You going for another bite?
More.
Have some more? Riley's got cucumbers.
Cucumber.
Wow, that's a big piece of cucumber. Go for it.
More.
More, another big bite. You tasting it? Yum, yum, yum. It's delicious. Let's go back to the home page. I'm going to clear this crazy sentence.
Good.
Looks good. Delicious. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. So we had a few sound issues at the start of the video. It's just a quick video, Pam. I'm wondering if maybe we play it again just so everyone can watch it one more time. Okay, Riley, let's have something to eat.
Yeah.
Eat. Let's have something to eat. Let's go into your food words. I see you eating
Cheese
a
sandwich.
yummy cheese sandwich,
Cucumber.
a cucumber, and
Tomato.
some tomatoes. Yeah, what a good big bite.
Like.
You like cucumber?
Yeah. Yeah.
Eat cheese sandwich, cucumber, tomato like.
Wow, what a good sentence. You're eating a cheese sandwich, cucumber and tomato, and you like it. You going for another bite?
More.
Have some more? Riley's got cucumbers.
Cucumber.
Wow, that's a big piece of cucumber. Go for it.
More.
More, another big bite. You tasting it? Yum, yum, yum. It's delicious. Let's go back to the home page. I'm going to click sentence.
Good.
Looks good. Delicious. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Okay, so in this video, I was modeling different foods that Riley was having. So she was talking about cucumber and her cheese sandwich, and I was modeling those words for her. As well as the foods that she was talking about that she was eating, I was also modeling a variety of core words like eat, yum, good, taste. At times, she wasn't even looking at the screen, but that's okay. I kept modeling and talking to her, and then she did eventually gain interest and start looking at the screen and interacting with the screen. In this interaction, I really wasn't doing anything different than I would be doing in that interaction without the screen present. So in that interaction, when she's regularly having a mealtime, I still would be talking to her about all of the things that she's eating and doing and being interactive. I'm really just adding the symbols in as well as an added support. You also see I really wasn't asking lots of questions. I was mostly narrating and making comments and making some statements about what she was doing in the mealtime. Okay, so we've got another video here of Riley. This is another important AAC strategy, which is about giving an AAC user time to explore the device. So let's watch the video first and then we'll discuss.
Good.
Oh, is it good? Good sandwich, hey?
Really.
Really good.
Much. A little. A little.
Wow, you're exploring all the describing words, Riley? Oops.
Like spicy, good, really, less, much, a little, less, a little.
Whoa, that's a crazy sentence. You're talking about all the different foods that you like. So in that video, I was letting her explore the iPad without any expectations. I didn't have an agenda. I didn't care if she wasn't holding it properly or if she didn't have it set nicely on the table or if she was pushing the correct buttons. It's really important when we're introducing AAC to a new user for them to explore and to be able to hear what the voice sounds like and see what the display sounds like. Similar to as adults, and even myself and Pam as speech pathologists, you know, new systems get released all the time, new different vocabulary sets, and we have to learn what the new systems look like before we can introduce them to clients. We need to have a play around with it and see the layout and see what all the buttons do before we can introduce it to a client. So even ourselves as the communication partners need to explore. So we need to give our kids the same grace and give them time to explore just to see what the device does. I guess another big take home from here is when she was exploring and she was holding the device, you know, letting her hold it, you know, at one point it even hit her on the chest and I didn't intervene, I just let it happen. Particularly with a 2-year-old, if we get a bit fussy about where the iPad is sit and making sure that it's on the table nicely and that she's sitting nicely, particularly with a 2-year-old, that can really turn into a battle. And then the interaction is done. So in this situation, when it's brand new to her, I'm letting her explore, I'm giving her some time, and there really is no right or wrong.
We want to give AAC users an environment where they feel comfortable communicating, and it's important that we don't make them feel rushed. So they need time to process what was said to them, to think about how they want to respond, and then to know where to locate the word. So if someone looks away during that time, they aren't likely to be motivated to use it. The same way if you're telling someone a story and they're looking at their phone or they're doing something else, you feel like they aren't interested and you may not want to finish your story. So it's important that we smile, we look at them encouragingly, but we don't make them feel any pressure to use the device. We can remind them that we're there and we're ready to listen when they have something to say. So we can say, take your time, I'm listening, I'm here. In a study done by Mathis, Sutherland, and McAuliffe in 2011, they looked at 3 different wait times for young AAC users. So there was 2 at 10 and 45 seconds. Those were the different wait times offered during a shared storybook reading task. And each child had 27 turn opportunities during the story. So the findings indicated that the children were more likely to respond to a turn opportunity when their communication partner provided a longer pause time. And a longer pause time also resulted in longer MLUs because they felt they had more time to put something together. Participants continued to use a variety of communication modes when provided with a longer pause time. So basically, when reading, if a child was given 45-second pause when it was their turn, they were more likely to communicate, whether it was with verbal speech, an AAC tool, pointing to a picture. If they only had 2 seconds, they may not have had enough time to process that it was their turn to say something and then come up with what they wanted to say. So results showed that increasing the pause time really is an effective strategy to support the development of expressive communication for AAC users. And it's important for us as communication partners to provide those extended pauses.
Okay, so we're going to look at another video of Riley showing the strategy of waiting and also of following her lead. So this video is the first time that Riley was introduced to a low-tech printout of TD Snap. Again, in this video, I have no agenda. I'm letting her look and explore, and I'm waiting to see what she's interested in and what she points at. When she does point at something, I'm assuming it's intentional and I'm adding meaning to it. This is the first time she's seen this, so it's highly likely that she did not know what the symbols meant. But in this interaction, I was assuming that it was intentional and assuming that she knew what they meant. I'm not asking her to point to anything. I'm allowing her to look and explore, again, without any right or wrong. So let's watch the video and then we'll discuss afterwards.
Oh, feelings. Yeah, it looks like you're feeling very happy and hungry today. Read. Will you like reading books? We can read a book later. So many words, Riley. Look, you're eating. Yeah.
Cookies.
Yeah, feeling hungry. Feeling hungry. Feeling hungry. You like the cheese sandwich?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, you like it. Like cheese sandwich. Oh, you're doing the, yeah, this says thinking. Thinking. Oh, Riley's thinking. Maybe you're thinking about how delicious your sandwich is.
Oh no.
Oh no, what happened? Looking at all of these words. It says personal words, little words.
What is this one?
Yeah, you're eating. Well, Mama's not eating, but Riley's eating.
Dada's eating.
Dada's eating.
Why?
That says my. It's my sandwich. My sandwich.
My side.
Good job. You like it. I like it.
Okay, so in that video, Riley's been given time to explore, and I'm following her lead. You'll see at the start she pushed feeling words. So in the context, I assumed intention, and I said, "You're feeling hungry," because she was eating a sandwich. If we were playing with Play-Doh and she pushed feeling, I might say, "You're feeling happy," or you might talk about the feeling of the Play-Doh as you're squishing it. I tried to follow her interest and to make her exploring intentional, even when she probably didn't really know what the symbols meant, because it was the first time that she was exploring this. I think she did know the symbol for think, that's why she was scratching her head and saying think. And again, I tried to make that as intentional as possible. You'll see it as well. At one time, she picked the board up and she was flinging it around, and I didn't intervene. That's okay. She had her turn of it and then put it back down on the table. We don't want to make that a battle of making sure that it's sitting nicely on the table. It's okay if she moves it around. It can be really hard to wait. You know, as communication partners, we sometimes feel the need to fill the silence and to take the lead, which is a error that we come up with time and time again, of communication partners dominating all the conversation and not waiting and giving users time to explore. It can be hard. You know, Pam and I do this for a living. As speech pathologists, we're quite chatty. We ourselves find it hard to wait. It does take practice, and at the start, waiting and having silence sometimes feels unnatural, and we want to try to fill that silence. But it is a really important and really powerful strategy to give the user time to explore and to give them time to initiate. You know, another thing with this board is that she was pointing and looking, and I was trying to make it as intentional as possible within the context of a mealtime. But sometimes we do see users, particularly with like a high-tech device, they might explore and go really, really quickly between all of the different buttons. So if Riley was doing that in this situation, I would have to choose which ones I was making intentional. So I wouldn't be saying, "Oh, eating, and yes, you're feeling this, and yes, we're talking about data now." That's too chaotic. But if a child is doing that and moving really quickly, you can use your judgment as well about which symbols you feel are which symbols you feel are important in the context, and try to follow that to make it as intentional and meaningful as possible. Okay, so this slide is a resource from the AAC coach, who we will reference a bit in this presentation. We will include in the resource list at the end how to find the AAC coach, but she has some really great information, and we encourage you to check it out. She has a website and a Facebook page and an Instagram page. She has a lot of really great graphics with some short and simple AAC strategies and information. But this graphic is important because it shows us that the very many reasons why we communicate with other people. So requesting is very important, and it's often where we start with AAC users to build motivation. However, it's also important to have access to all of these different functions. So, you know, an AAC user and everybody needs to be able to disagree, to protest, to describe, to greet other people, to negotiate, to express opinions and answer questions, to tell a joke, or to clarify, or to flirt, or to get attention. There are lots of different reasons why we communicate. So we really just wanted to highlight this slide, that we need to have access to all of these functions of communication in an AAC device. If we just give kids access to a picture of a cookie with nothing else, we aren't giving them access to all of the words that they need to build relationships and to share themselves with the world. So we're going to talk quickly now about core and fringe vocabulary and what this means. So we kind of mentioned this at the start when we were talking about different AAC systems, and these may or may not be familiar to you already if you have an early AAC user or if you work in a classroom. But when we say core words, so core words make up about 80% of our output, and they involve frequent words that are often quite hard to depict in a picture. So they're often verbs and adjectives and pronouns, so things like I, you, go, not, want, like. Fringe words, on the other hand, are specific words that are often nouns. They're more inconsistent, but they're often included in AAC users' really motivating items. So things that they want to request for. So things like cookie and pizza and movies or a holiday place like Florida. Core words provide the support for our messages, and the fringe words provide the specific detail. So if we go back to the flip and talk that we discussed earlier, you'll remember that the core words were always on that main page, while the fringe strip at the top can be moved around. And this is because the core vocabulary is generic and can be used across all situations and in all routines, regardless of which fringe tab you are in. Whereas a system like PECS has a lot of fringe words, which are motivating items for kids to request for, but you may miss out on having more robust core vocabulary. So to give you an example of core and fringe words in a sentence, let's use an example of a typical conversation you might have had with your partner or your child at the end of the day. So here's the sentence. How was your day? Yeah, it was good. What did you do? Not much. It was a boring day. Did you go anywhere interesting? Well, we played soccer. The only fringe word in that whole interaction that gives you any information about what the child did during the day is soccer, and the rest was core vocabulary. So for a robust system and to give AAC users access to all those functions of communication that we talked about before, we need both core and fringe vocabulary. Core is more powerful when combined with fringe, and vice versa. Fringe vocabulary is really important to give kids and adults and everyone access to things that they love and they want to talk about that is specific to them. And core vocabulary gives them that space to grow and to grow their sentence length. Often if we're trying to teach a new system or a language to a child, we want to get the most bang for our buck. So when thinking about a good word to teach them, we want to teach them a word that they will be able to use in a variety of situations. So if we focus on a core word like all done or more, they can use that when talking about almost anything throughout the day in the routine. And these are the type of words that can help reduce frustrations. If we teach them a fringe word like cookie, while still very important and still very motivating, they are limited and only able to use them when talking about cookies. So even think about yourself as a verbal speaker adult who's using these words all the time. Think about yourself, how many times during the day you would say more and all done versus how many times you might say the word cookie. So this slide is just to show the difference between core and fringe. But both of them are really important to have in a robust system.
So when introducing an AAC system, it's so important that it has a robust vocabulary that includes a variety of words across different word classes, as well as, like Amanda said, the combination of core and fringe vocabulary. We also need to be sure that the user can communicate for all the different communicative functions that Amanda just went over. So to highlight the importance of a robust vocabulary, I was actually working with a little boy who came home and he wanted to tell his mom about a video that he saw at school that day. But because it was a specific video and it was the first time he'd seen it, it wasn't in his device and mom wasn't able to just guess what it was. But he did have a large system with a variety of words that had previously been modeled to him. So he was able to say movie, and then he combined water and woman. And mom was able to guess that he was talking about the Little Mermaid. And then she was able to program it in the device for next time. So when they have enough words, they're so clever in the strategies that they're able to use to communicate with us. We want a system that will grow with them and not one that we have to continue to add to on a daily basis. So I'd rather give a child a ton of words, and he might not need all of them today, but he can explore them when he wants to, and we can model them, rather than continue to add each day and have him need to continue to relearn his system each time. So if we think back to the importance of motor planning when learning a device, we want to start with the largest grid size that they can access. I did mention the possibility of masking earlier, so I'll quickly touch on it. There are two opposing views on this, and everyone needs to decide for themselves and for that specific client what makes the most sense. I will say that personally, I prefer to start off with a full device without any masking. And if they really can't handle it, or if they seem super overwhelmed, I may work backwards and start masking. But I do find that often it's the parent or the educator actually who feels that it's overwhelming, because the child doesn't know any different. If that's what they're given, that's what they're going to learn. If you do choose to start with masking, that's okay too. But I will reinforce the importance of having a large grid size so we don't mess up the motor memory that they work so hard for. And we want to open their access to more and more vocabulary as quickly as we can. So like Amanda was saying earlier in the presentation, we don't want to make them master something before they can earn the next word. My final push for starting off with as much vocabulary as possible is just remembering that what we model and what we give them access to is all they can say. And we don't want to forget that when we speak to verbal children from the day they're born, we don't mask our vocabulary. So we use all the words that we would typically use with adults, even though we don't expect them to use them back. And it's the same thing. So we can give them access to a ton of words, we can model them, and we don't need to expect them to use all of them right now. There is also kind of like an in-between option that some apps have started to support, and that's called vocabulary filter. And basically, this is a setting on a child's profile that you can turn on, and you can choose specifically which words you want them to have access to in the moment. So this can be helpful when targeting something specific, because you can choose a few words for an activity, and then you can turn the vocabulary filter off during the rest of the time so that when they're just exploring, they have access to everything. This can also be really good for errorless learning, even though technically it's always errorless because we want to reinforce everything they say, even if it's not intentional. But say, for example, you're doing a baking activity. You can filter it so only words that are relevant would come up. So like mix, pour, put, like, good, yummy, bowl, eggs, so on. So those are the ones that are open. And literally anything they press during this activity is super easily reinforced and on topic. In the end, the ideal is that a user can use a full keyboard with word prediction so that they can be completely in charge of what they communicate. So it's really important that we give our AAC users the support needed to learn literacy, because having strong literacy skills is the key to having the most robust AAC and being able to say anything at any time without any restrictions. That being said, since it's not always possible, the more words we can give them, the better we are setting them up for success. So this is just a quick video to demonstrate the importance of having a robust vocabulary.
Many times, people ask, why does my child or student need all of those words in their AAC device? Where is my coffee?
Coffee. The dog drank your coffee.
We know that most kids don't love coffee, but they still might need to say that word. Having a large vocabulary allows our kids to access what words they need when they want. This means they're ready for the unexpected.
So we need to remember it isn't up to us to decide what words a user will need. They really need to be able to say anything. And we often hear quotes from parents where a child says something completely ridiculous and random that we would have never expected. And we want AAC users to have these same opportunities. So they need to be able to decide what words they may want to say. Something else to keep in mind, we don't always like what children have to say. So sometimes children swear or they say things that are completely inappropriate. And AAC users should have the same opportunity to say those things. So I do have a lot of teens with swear words on their devices because the reality is it's our job as educators and parents to teach children what may or may not be appropriate to say. But the same way we can't physically stop a verbal 13-year-old from swearing, it's not fair to censor a nonverbal 13-year-old. The same way teenagers know which words they should and shouldn't be saying, but sometimes they still feel the need to say them. It's important that an AAC user has access to words that they can decide when they want to use. On that note, just a quick tidbit about vocabulary across environments. I think it's really important for children to have access to the same words in every environment. I often get requests for a school communication book with photos of the staff, the toys, the snacks they have at school, and then a home book with photos of family members, the toys they have at home, the foods they eat at home. Imagine how confusing it is for a child to be able to communicate about one thing at home and then not at school. Sometimes parents or teachers feel like if we put pictures of, let's say, ice cream and mom in the school book, it'll set them up for failure because we're offering them choices that they can't have. But we need to remember the book isn't a book of their choices. It's really their voice. And the reality is a verbal child can ask for ice cream at school, and we need to tell them no. It's okay and it's normal for a child to get upset because they can't have ice cream when they want, and we've all seen that. But it's not okay for a child to get upset because they have no way of even telling someone that they want to have ice cream. So that's what we want to be careful of. I want to briefly review prompting and the way that we go about it with AAC users. But before I get into it, I'm going to go back to the one thing I keep repeating, which is if we couldn't do it with a verbal child, we shouldn't do it with an AAC user. So let's imagine we're sitting with a new AAC user and they're being prompted to say something, whether it's trying to get them to ask for more or to ask for a cookie, say go. So they start reaching towards a button and then immediately we take their hand and we gently guide them to the button that they're supposed to press. This happens a lot. When we're with a verbal child, anything they say, regardless of the situation, is perceived as intentional and meaningful. So even if we're working on a math equation and we're trying to get them to answer with the correct number, and instead they say, I'm hungry, we may need to redirect them and explain that it isn't time to eat, but it never crosses our mind that them saying I'm hungry was an error. We just assume that they're hungry or maybe they want to get out of doing math, but it wasn't a mistake. And with AAC users, if they select a button that isn't what we were trying to work on, I find we automatically redirect and assume it's an error rather than them just trying to initiate a different message. We all have good intentions when it comes to prompting, but the most important is that the AAC says what the user wants it to say. So we may be able to guess, and sometimes we may be correct, but sometimes we may be completely off. So if a child is, let's say, throwing their toy, we may take their hand and get them to push not like, because we want to teach them that if they don't like their toy, they can just use their words, tell us they don't like it, and not throw it. Again, these are great intentions, but maybe they love their toy and maybe they're just frustrated that they can't get it to work properly and they didn't have any way to communicate that. And now we're using their voice to say that they didn't like their toy. And that's really not fair. Another issue is that if we continuously make requests when they're using the device, so like show me blue, tell me go, they start to see it as work. And we want them to be excited and motivated to use their voice. It's so important that they see it as a positive communication tool, because when they start to see it as more work, they're not going to be interested anymore. Something else that has recently come up that we don't always think about is Unfortunately, people with disabilities, especially those who are nonverbal, are at a high risk for abuse. And we want to make sure we're not teaching our learners to think that it's acceptable when someone is physically manipulating them, like using hand over hand. So if you do need to do hand over hand, it's important to ask for consent. And then finally, our goal for AAC users is that they can tell us what they want, when they want. We want them to be able to initiate and not just answer questions. So it's important that the way we teach them to use AAC supports that and doesn't encourage them to just be responders. And the way we can do this, we can look for signs of initiation. So signs of initiation could be them throwing a toy, making a vocalization, pointing, maybe grabbing your hand to bring you somewhere. These are all them trying to communicate a message. And when you see it, you can use the device to model. So you can say, it looks like you want to tell me to come, and we can model want come. Or it looks like you have something to tell me, and we can model the word tell. Or you're looking at something, and we can model the word looking. We're just making statements about what we're observing. So we're not putting words in their mouth, but we are pointing out that they're initiating, and we're modeling that the device can be used to initiate. So how do we prompt? Before we can even think of prompting, we want to wait until we've provided enough modeling and aided language input that we can safely assume that they are proficient enough on their system to communicate a message independently. So for example, you're not going to walk into Spanish class on your first day and be prompted to say something in Spanish because the teacher knows you have zero experience. You would have no idea where to even begin. But once we know that they've had enough exposure, we may want to prompt a user to communicate, but we don't want to prompt what they have to say because it's not our decision to choose what they want to say. So for example, let's say we ask them what they want to do. Most importantly, we want to give a 15 to 30 second wait time so they know that we're here, we're listening. So we're looking at them encouragingly and giving them the time to put their thoughts together and to remember how to say that word on their system. Because remember, it's a new language for them. If they don't respond and they look away and just start doing something else, we can probably assume that they have nothing to say to us at that time, and that's okay. We don't always feel like talking. If they are looking at us or if they're looking at their device, we may want to give a verbal cue like, I'm wondering if there's something you want to say, and then again, give them some time. We may also want to give a more direct prompt, like point to the device and say something like, oh, your talker may help me understand better. If we still want to provide a prompt even after that, we can model some options for them of potential messages that they may want to say. So for example, if we ask them what they want to do and they just look at us, we can model some options like, I wonder if you want to go for a walk, and we can model go walk, or play with your cars, and we can model play cars. We're just giving them choices and modeling it in a language that they can copy if they choose to do so. And you'll notice when I say a full English sentence, and then I point out a couple words to model, we're not going to be able to model in the moment a full complete sentence. So we still can speak the whole sentence, but we can choose keywords to model that we can use to show them. And those are also words if they use the words play car or go walk, we understand exactly what they're saying. So by doing that, we're just giving them choices and modeling it in a language, and they can copy it if they want. What we don't want to do is take their finger and use hand over hand so that we make them say go walk, because maybe that's the last thing they want to do today.
Okay, so we're going to talk about multimodal communication. So if you remember back to one of the first slides that we talked about, the study with autistic adult AAC users, and one of the users said how they love multimodal communication and that it's really important to them. So we all communicate in a variety of different ways. We've touched on this briefly before as well, that even as a neurotypical adult, who uses speech. We still text, we still use facial expressions, we still nod our heads, point, make vocalizations, we use body language to communicate. Think about if you're having a conversation with your friend at a cafe and they pointed to a glass of water and they said to you, "Can I have that?" You wouldn't then say to them, "Nope, use your words," because you know exactly what they said with different modes of communication. They looked and they pointed, message received. They don't need to tell you again. This is an error that we can fall into really easily with AAC learners, particularly when we really want them to succeed. If an AAC learner is able to tell you really clearly what they want with their eyes, or with a point, or with a word approximation, or with whichever way of communication that they choose, you don't have to expect them again to tell you on their AAC device. In saying that, you can model to show them how to say it in a different way. So let's say that they pointed to the glass of water, you knew exactly what they wanted. You might then show on their device, "Oh, you want some water," right? And you might then point to the symbol of water. However, we don't need to ask, they don't need to tell us again on the device. We really want to eliminate phrases such as "show me again on your talker," because again, we want it to be fun. We want it to be motivating and exciting. And if we're telling kids to tell us the same thing over and over again in different ways, it becomes a test and then not so fun for the AAC user anymore.
So I'm going to quickly touch on bilingual AAC users. We know the importance of bilingualism and supporting AAC learners in all the languages that they're exposed to. So if a child is being raised in a bilingual household, we want to do what we can to give them access to both languages. This is still an emerging technology, so some systems have started to create high-tech profiles in other languages, but it does depend on the language and the tool that they're using. So we have listed some devices and programs that do have French vocabulary sets, and many of these have vocabulary sets in other languages as well. But regardless of language, all the same modeling rules apply, and you can switch between page sets depending on who you're speaking to or where you are. Ideally, the page set will have many of the words in the same place so that the motor memory they learned can be used for both. Obviously, this depends on the language and if there's a direct translation for a specific word, but the more that we can preserve, the better. You can also create a low-tech system with French or any other language that's being spoken at home. And the good thing about low-tech is that if it's just created with symbols, everyone can model the same symbol while using their own language to label it. And this provides the child with a great way to learn different languages while having a consistent symbol to refer to, which would also support motor planning.
So what happens if a child or adult or any AAC user is refusing to use their device? Sometimes it gets assumed, that just because the young child isn't saying exactly what we want them to be saying, that they don't understand the system. But what if they just don't like the system, but they can't tell you that they're bored, they can't tell you that they actually just want some juice with their fishies, they can't tell you that they are full and would rather play outside. They are only left with one way to communicate all this, which we tend to characterize as behaviors. And unfortunately, many people believe that these behaviors are indicative of a child not being ready to move forward with a more robust communication system. How are we supposed to expect a child to be able to communicate without an appropriate communication device? That makes sense, yet we are still often told that a child wouldn't be a good candidate for AAC because they have not demonstrated the ability to communicate. So let's talk about some of the questions that we can ask ourselves as the communication partner if a child is refusing to use their device. So have you given enough time for aided language input? Like we've said at the start of the presentation, it can take a long time for aided language input. Very often, sometimes with really eager families who want their kid to learn it straight away, if we introduce a system, we might hear from the family next week, a week after we've introduced it, and they'll say, well, she's not using it. Sometimes that's enough time, but very often that's not enough time. And we do need to provide lots and lots of opportunities and enough time for our AAC users to have aided language input. If we're having difficulty, are we modeling without expectation? Are we asking too many questions? Are we making it a test so it's not very fun? Have we prompted too much? Pam just spoke about the different types of prompting. So often we see kids who have had too much hand-over-hand prompting, and we will have an interaction with them and they hold their hand out like this and want you to take their hand to point to a symbol, which just shows us that they've had too much hand-over-hand prompting, that they need help to initiate, to push any buttons. So have we prompted too much, or have we not prompted in the right way? Have we taken into consideration access needs, like a child's vision or their motor skills or their hearing? We are going to touch on that a little bit later about what if a child does have difficulties in these areas. And sometimes we start working with kids and we introduce a system, and then it becomes apparent a little bit later on that a child might have changes to their vision or changes to their hearing status or changes to their motor movements. That doesn't mean we stop a system. There's adaptations we can make to a system, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on, but something to consider, that have all of those things been taken into account. Do all communication partners have appropriate training? We can't just send devices off to school and just hope that everybody learns how to use it. We need to train everybody about what is the system and how can we implement it appropriately with an AAC user. Again, we're really pushing this point today. Are we testing too much? Is it not fun? Are we asking too many questions? Like, are we asking the AAC user to touch too many colors and name too many colors or name too many foods when it doesn't become fun that way? Does everyone believe in the child? So we want everybody to presume potential and believe that the child has the ability to use the AAC system. And have we considered the environment? Is the environment too busy? Is there too many noises? Is there too many distractions around? Thinking about the environment that the child is in, and which also includes the communication partners and who they're speaking to. So we just have a quote here that we think is really important, that having a communication device doesn't make you an effective communicator any more than having a piano makes you a musician. We can't just put a communication device in an AAC user's hands and expect that they know how to use it and expect that they know how to use it immediately. It takes time and it takes effort from the communication partners and the team around the child or the AAC user. But if you have a robust system, don't give up. We can problem solve and figure out what other things are going on without saying that the child isn't ready for a device and taking it away.
So I'd like to quickly touch on stimming, as that's something that often comes up, especially with children with autism. So first and foremost, we need to remember that stimming is important for autistic children to help cope with big emotions or overwhelming situations or sensory overload. It's often a necessary release that they need to let out in order to help calm themselves. That being said, we can try to redirect the behavior without stopping them from stimming. So we can try to observe what's going on when they're repeatedly pressing a button. Is the classroom too loud? Are they tired or nervous? Once you determine what may be causing the stimming, you can try to address that issue specifically, but we never want to remove the device. So basically, we want to address it in the same way that we would address verbal children who are stimming. Just like we can't physically stop a child from stimming verbally, we don't want to remove the device, because if they are stimming, they'll just replace it with a different stimming behavior. So now all we've done is make them anxious and we've removed their words. Sometimes if they're repeatedly pressing a button, it's actually just AAC babbling. And AAC babbling is just as important as a baby starting to babble. So when a baby starts to play with sounds, we encourage it by imitating them, even giving their sounds meaning that they may not have intended them to have. So for example, when a child says, "Mama, mama," we may respond like, "Mama, that's right, I'm mama." Even though they were really just playing with their sounds and babbling, but that's how we give it meaning, and that's how they learn that to say mama. So when an AAC user starts to explore different words, even if they press multiple ones in a row, they're getting the auditory feedback, and that's really important to their learning. When they select a button, it's important that we treat it as meaningful. So if they, let's say, randomly say car, you can say, yeah, my car's outside. Let's go look at the car. And we can model the word car back a couple times to show them how we're using the word meaningfully. And if they're repeating a word like car, it may also be them trying to comment on something they saw earlier or telling you that they want to go in the car. We have to remember they're learning to use their voice, and we need to respect that. So like we mentioned at the beginning, there are many alternate ways to access an AAC system if a child can't use their finger or if they have vision or hearing impairments. So there are ways that we can adapt AAC, and it depends on the level of impairment and the type of tool that they're using. So for vision impairments, you can use high contrast symbols with bright colors on a black background. You can have an adapted grid size or backlighting on a device to make it easier for them to see. For a more severe vision impairment, you can use tactile symbols or a touch guide, which is like a key guard, but it may have some raised bumps, and that'll help them localize and navigate through the buttons. We also work with plenty of children who don't use their hands at all. So some kids use switches, which is a button that might connect to their device, and they can access this in a variety of ways. It could be the side of their head. It could be on their tray if maybe they have like a gross motor hand movement and they just can't isolate their fingers. It could be their elbow. The OT is there to help support and find that access point. It can also be an eye gaze system where a child is using their eyes to select symbols, and this could be either high or low tech. So for low tech, like you see on the bottom of the screen, a partner can hold this in front of their face, and then it's easy to see where the child is looking. And this could be, 4 symbols in 4 corners. It could be an alphabet board. It can really be anything. We can also have a key guard, which you see at the bottom, to support a touchscreen if they have difficulty pointing with accuracy. Another way we often use is partner-assisted auditory scanning. And that's where the communication partner gives options verbally, and AAC users have a signal. So that could be smiling or vocalization, or maybe it's even like pushing a button. Like we can use the Big Mac we spoke about earlier, and the Big Mac could say, that's the one I want. And then they use that signal when they hear the option that they want. So for example, we can say, okay, it's time to eat. We have apple, yogurt, or cookie. So when you hear the one you want, I want you to use your voice or your switch or whatever they're using to tell me. And then we go through each option slowly, allowing time for a response in between each. So apple, yogurt, cookie. It's important to preview the choices first, though, because no one wants to make a choice not knowing if something better is going to come up. So there really are so many ways that a child can access a system. And like I said, OTs can support a lot in this area. So we recommend speaking with your multidisciplinary team for support regarding alternative access if that's something that's needed.
Okay, so let's talk about some strategies for implementing AAC at school. So these strategies can also be used at home as well, but we're kind of focusing on ways we can use these strategies in the classroom. So the first one is probably an obvious one, is having the device accessible at all times during the day. So we don't want any devices in bags, even if the goal of the activity isn't expressive language. So we don't want to see things like, oh, now it's circle time, so let's go get the device, or now we're doing an academic activity, let's go get the device. The device really should be with the child at all times throughout the day. And that's where I'm using the example of an iPad, but if a child does have an iPad, having like a carrying strap on the iPad or a handle with the iPad so that it is portable around the room is important. We can also use that for low tech. We've done plenty of flip and talks as well that we've attached a bag strap to, so the child can carry it around with them as well. But it really needs to go with them everywhere throughout the day. Another probably obvious one, but have a charger for the classroom. So, you know, I'm using the example of an iPad because they're so common, but iPads' battery life does not last forever. The brand new ones sometimes have really good battery life that lasts all day, but particularly if you have an old iPad, they do run out of battery quite quickly. So having quite a few chargers for the classroom is a good backup, so a child isn't left without their device during the day. And if iPads do run out of battery, that's where having that low-tech backup that Pam, if they do have a high-tech device, having a low-tech backup that Pam was talking about previously is really important. So they're not just relying on having that iPad charged up. Protect the device. So again, we're talking about an iPad here, but if you have an iPad with a AAC app, back up the device. So make sure you back up all of the changes that you have on a computer. So which happens all the time, if a kid gets into the menu and makes edits and moves everything around, that you're able to get a backup of that system. You're not having to start from scratch. Use a waterproof and a shockproof case on your iPads. Very important. iPads get thrown, they get dropped. It happens. So having a really strong case is really important. Even like myself, I drop my phone all the time. I had to buy an OtterBox case for my iPhone, and I dropped it down a whole flight of stairs, and it bounced down every single stair and didn't break. So it's worth the money if we can afford it, to have a really good case on the iPad to protect it. And if you're doing low tech, laminate it so you're not having to constantly remake and reprint symbols. Laminating, as a side note, is also really helpful if you're taking like a low-tech board in the pool. So if a child has no system, or they are using a low-tech, if they don't have a high-tech system and they're using low-tech, sometimes like triple laminating a core board and having that available either at the side of the pool or on the kickboard is really important so that it's protected, and they also have access to those words in the pool. Spend some time getting to know the device and the layout. So we've said many times during this presentation, but it is like learning a new language. And I can't teach somebody how to speak Spanish if I don't speak Spanish myself. So if a child comes into the classroom with a brand new device, spend some time yourself away from the child if you can, like if they don't need the device for a second, or if you have a backup device, getting to know the layout and where everything is. We do this ourselves. You know, like I said, new systems come out all the time. A strategy I use for myself is if a new vocabulary layout comes out, I will use it around the house. So I'll walk around the house and I'll have a look around different things in the routine and try to find different words on the device of things in my environment. So then I know where the familiar words are. Another strategy you can use with that is if you're playing with a child and they have a device and you're new to the device, is pre-learning yourself a few words that you might want to model to the child in that situation. So let's use cars as an example. You know, in a car activity, you might say more, you might say go, you'll probably say car, you might say up, you might say down, you might say crash. So let's say just 6 words. If you know you're going to be saying those words all the time, it might be worth, before you go into that interaction, figuring out where those words are on the device so they're familiar to you and you're ready to show the user when you're playing with them. Having a dedicated communication device or an iPad. So particularly with an iPad, if a child comes in with an iPad and they have a communication app and they also have access to YouTube, it's really hard to compete with YouTube if a child knows how to get into YouTube. So it's up to the team if you want to choose this or not as a strategy, but you could put that device into guided access on an Apple device, and it's a really quick Google search on how to use guided access. But essentially what it does is locks the child into the app and they can't get out of that app to do other things on the iPad without a password. We talked about this before, but never removing the device. So if a child has an iPad and they're in circle time and they're calling out and they're disrupting the class, we don't want to remove the device. Just like if a verbal child is calling out in a class in a circle time, we can't put their hand over their mouth to make them stop yelling out. That would be the equivalent of removing the device, right? So the way that we handle that is just by putting in some behavioral expectations, but we never want to remove a device away from a child. Again, make it fun and make it as fun as you possibly can. You know, use the iPad in a social interaction, in an activity where they might be playing with bubbles or playing with cars with a friend or going outside or going on a field trip. It doesn't always have to be in, you know, tabletop structured activities. Make it as fun as possible, and that's how you can build motivation. Set some achievable goals as a team. So the end goal for a child using AAC in the classroom is for them to use it all the time with everyone and everywhere. But we know when there's a brand new system, that's a big ask. We can't just go from 0 to 100. So sometimes setting some really achievable goals for the classroom and building on those is a good way to start and to build motivation from your team. You know, Pam and I have worked in classrooms sometimes where the educators might have modeling competitions. So between the staff, they might, you know, we're not saying tally and spend time away from the device, but taking note for themselves that how many times they modeled throughout the day, and the winner might get a coffee or a treat or something like that to build some motivation in your team to model. And if your child doesn't want you to model on their device, that's okay. It is their voice. We want to respect their boundaries. If a child is pushing you away, which has happened to us many times when we're interacting with a child, we want to respect that. There are other ways we can model on a device. We could get a separate device. We could get a low-tech printout of the device, particularly with a lot of these really common AAC apps. A lot of them have low-tech printouts available on their website. And again, we're going to share this at the resource list at the end. But you can go into their website and print off a printout of the core vocabulary page and some fringe vocabulary page. So you might have that as an aside to model vocabulary if the child won't let you touch their system. Okay, so some more ideas. So you could create a core board for the wall of the classroom or the playground to make AAC part of everyone's day. So let's say, for example, you have a lot of Proloquo users in your classroom. You could go into their website and you could get a core printout and blow it up and have it on the wall of the classroom. That means your AAC user could use it. Other kids also can use it in the classroom. Anyone can use it. I also like it's a good signal for the classroom that AAC is accepted and happens here. And it's a nice inclusion tool to have. It's a signal that it's AAC is used in the classroom. You could also have pathways for vocabulary posted in strips around the classroom. So you might print out like a short phrase with symbols and post them around the classroom. So you might have, for example, like turn on light. You might have those 3 symbols in a row, and you might print them and put them next to the light. Or you could have go outside near the entrance to the playground, or put on hat near your kid's cubby. Again, just more symbol exposure. In the classroom, you could also include reading and audiovisual materials that feature AAC users. We didn't include this in the slides, but just a really quick Google search of books that include AAC users. There's a lot more material coming out now. Now that there's more education and awareness about AAC, there are a lot more children's books that have AAC users and TV shows and movies that have AAC users. So again, that might be a nice idea for the classroom, is to promote inclusion and promote more visibility of AAC users. Another strategy is social. We want to make it social and including social participation for AAC. So again, a quick Google search of, we've just got it here, 101 ideas for using a Big Mac. There's lots of handouts online of lots of different ways that you can use a Big Mac in a circle time. So again, the Big Mac might not be the child's dedicated system. It might be, as the classroom, you have a Big Mac, and all users can have a turn of the Big Mac so that they have a voice and then they can participate in the circle time. So it might be in circle time, it might be greeting people. You might record good morning. It might be recording the message, I'm here, so they can take attendance. It might be requesting a turn in a game, or saying the weather or the calendar, or requesting different songs, or even saying different lines of songs. It's a way that everybody can socially join in together in an activity. Again, pushing that point of teaching, not testing throughout the day, so making it as fun as possible. And another strategy that you could use is having a core word of the day or the week. So your team might decide that this week, our core word that we're going to focus on modeling for all of our kids' devices is the word help. And that might be displayed somewhere in the classroom. And all of the educators would be focusing as much as they can to model those words on a kid's system. I've done that before in a group of the core vocabulary word was more, and we were doing an activity with bubbles. So with everybody's device, they had to request for more before we had a turn of the bubbles. And here's just some quick visuals to show you this. So up the top there, we've got a playground core board that could be used outside. There's, again, lots of different variations of this. You might display also some signs in the classroom, some sign language. You might have a board of all the different sign language that kids could use. There's an example of the core word of the week, and also a core board. So that particular core board is based on touch chat, but again, you could use any symbol set for a core board. Okay, so one more quick slide here, and then we're going to take a quick break. So just really a message that teamwork really does make the dream work. So AAC really can't take place just in a speech pathologist's office. We think back to that graphic at the start of the presentation about it taking 84 years for a kid to learn AAC just from 20 minutes a week. The idea is for AAC to take place everywhere. A big part of the intervention that Pam and I do with families is coaching communication partners so that they're able to use AAC. And we want kids to be able to use their device at home and in everyday routines, and it doesn't have to be sitting down at a table. Our job with AAC is we want families to be confident enough that they don't need us anymore and that they are the expert on their child's device, which is really important because teams change. You know, speech pathologists leave jobs, teachers go on maternity leave or on holiday or move countries, or there are a variety of reasons. But as the professionals, if we are the ones holding all of the information and the families aren't the experts on the device, and then that professional leaves, then the family are left to start again. So coaching and giving families the power and all the information about using their device is so important. Okay, so we're going to stop there for a quick 10-minute break.
All right. So we have a few quick activities now. So first, we want to show you a video, and we want you to make some notes on what was done wrong and what maybe could have been done instead. So we're going to play the video once, and then we're going to leave about 5 minutes for you to think of some ideas. And then when we come back, we'll review everything, and then we'll play it one more time just to give you a chance to notice everything.
Hey, Riley. Hey, Riley, what are you doing? Are you eating?
Eat.
Tell me eat.
Eat.
I'll try again because you didn't push it properly.
Eat.
You have anything to eat? Can you tell Dada as well? Hey, Dada, what am I doing? I'm having something too?
Eat.
Oh, yeah, tell me on this though.
Eat.
Have something to eat. What are you eating? We should find it together. You're eating a?
Croissant.
Croissant. Tell me again. It's a?
Croissant.
Croissant. Okay, we're going to do something else now. Let's go here. Let's go to things. Body parts. What's this? What's this? No, we're not talking about food. We're talking about body parts. What's this?
No, okay.
It's your hand. Look, ready?
No.
Oh, that's silly. Do it nicely.
No.
Do it nicely. That's your hand.
No.
Nicely. Hand.
No.
That's your hand.
Hand.
What's this?
No.
What's this? For your tummy? Is that your tummy, Riley?
No, Dada.
We're not talking about Dada. We're talking about body parts. That's your tummy.
No.
Oh, no. Hold it nicely, please. Hold it nicely.
Eat, stop, eat, croissant, croissant, hand.
Okay.
No.
You tell me. Oh, if you're going to be silly, I'm going to take it away. Okay, all done.
Okay, so we're going to give you about 5 minutes to come up with some of the things that were done wrong and then what could have been done instead. All right, so what was done wrong? There was a lot of questions, so asking way too many questions, some testing, forcing communication when she wasn't interested, expecting her to be perfect, making her repeat herself to someone else or just again on the device even. We asked her to say it on the talker, even though she had already said it verbally, using hand over hand, repetitive drills, changing topics, not following her lead or the conversation, and then at the end, taking the device away, which is the number one thing we don't want to do. So many things done wrong, there's a lot that could be changed. And this isn't an exhaustive list, and you may have also come up with other ideas that aren't listed here as well. So following her lead, we could have respected the other modes of communication and encouraged all of her communication attempts. We could have respected that she just didn't want to communicate at that time. Modeling more without expectations, more commenting, less testing. So there's a lot that could have been done. So we're going to play the video one more time just to give you a chance to pick up on anything that was mentioned that you might have missed the first time.
Hey, Riley, what are you doing? Are you eating? Eat. Tell me eat. Eat. I'll try again because you didn't push it properly. Eat. You having something to eat? Can you tell Dada as well? Hey, Dada, what am I doing? I'm having something too?
Eat.
Oh, yeah, tell me on this though. Eat. Have something to eat. What are you eating? We should find it together. You're eating a?
Croissant.
Croissant. Tell me again. It's a?
Croissant.
Croissant. Okay, we're going to do something else now. Let's go here. Let's go to things. Body parts. What's this? What's this? No, we're not talking about food. We're talking about body parts. What's this?
No, okay.
It's your hand. Look, ready?
No.
Oh, that's silly. Do it nicely.
No.
Do it nicely. That's your hand.
No.
Nicely. Hand.
No.
That's your hand.
Hand.
What's this?
No.
What's this? For your tummy? Is that your tummy, Riley?
No, Dada.
We're not talking about Dada. We're talking about body parts. That's your tummy.
No.
Oh, no. Hold it nicely, please. Hold it nicely.
Eat, stop, eat, croissant, croissant, hand.
Okay.
No.
You tell me. Oh, if you're going to be silly, I'm going to take it away. Okay, all done.
So hopefully that was helpful and gave you some insight on what not to do.
Okay, so we're going to look at a video now of a much better example. So we're going to play this video and have a look at which strategies you observe. We also want to, just on the next slide, Pam, if you don't mind flicking to that one. We're going to play the video for you, so have a think about the strategies. And in this video, we're using a printout of TD Snap. So we've got a copy for you here. So also just have a think about using this this layout. What are some other words that you might think to model for Riley in this activity?
I want more. More Play-Doh. You have a lot. Let's put it all together. What should we make? Let's think. I need, thank you. You gave me some more. I'm gonna make something. Thank you. I'm gonna make a ball. What do you want to do?
Mama.
You want to do something too? Do Play-Doh. Can you give me some more? Do you need help? You did it. Thank you. What should we make?
Goodbye.
Oh, look. Gonna make a ball. We could tell the ball, go!
Go.
Yeah, it stopped. What else should we make?
Go.
Look, I'm gonna put it on my hand. I put it on my hand.
Apple.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? You put it on your hand too. Should we try something different? Oh, thank you. I have so much Play-Doh. Do you want some? Thank you. You're giving me more. You're going to take it out of there? Should we give some? Thank you. What else should we make? I'm going to make a snake.
No, make it.
Go! Roll, 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 roll. Stop.
Then what to roll,
Yeah, go. Come. Roll, 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 roll. Stop. Stop. Yeah. Yeah, you're trying too. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to just give you guys a couple of minutes to have a think about the strategies that you observed and what other words that you might have modeled in that activity with that symbol set. Okay, so some strategies that Pam did in that activity. So it was a much nicer interaction than the previous video. So some of the strategies were Pam was following her lead and looking at what she was interested in, respecting other modes of communication. Sometimes she said a word, sometimes she gestured, and that was okay. Respecting that she didn't really want to use the board and she didn't really want to use to communicate. She didn't really touch the board that much in that activity, but that didn't really stop at all what Pam was doing, and Pam was still modeling on the board. Pam was doing a lot of modeling without expectations, commenting and not testing, encouraging all communication attempts. In that particular board, there's a lot of core vocabulary, so she was modeling lots of core vocabulary. There was lots of pausing and waiting. Again, modeling, it's not always perfect. It wasn't perfect. We make mistakes. But the good thing about that activity was the focus was really on the interaction. The board was kind of just there as a supplement to the interaction. But you can see compared to the first video, Riley was really interacting with Pam. The focus was on the nice play experience, and the symbols were a supplement to that. For the first video, it really became a test and a fight over the device and making it perfect. So that video was just a nice example of modeling in a Play-Doh activity.
So we're just about ready to wrap up our workshop, but one thing we want to end on is that your mindset really matters. So we talked a lot about how to implement the use of a device and focusing on the child, but it's important to remember that AAC is a new language for you too. So modeling doesn't have to be and won't be perfect. It will take time and practice, so be patient with yourself. Any amount of modeling that you're able to do is more exposure than they would have received otherwise. So instead of assuming that a child isn't ready for a robust AAC system, just take a step back and try to teach them using some of the strategies that we discussed. Remember, it starts with the communication partner, and a child doesn't need to have any prerequisites to be exposed to modeling or aided language input. Instead of assuming a device is too complex for a child, remember that they don't need to perfect it. You can learn a couple words at a time, and then once you learn those words, you can model it for them, and they can start to learn them as well. And finally, be patient. It takes a long time to learn a language, but it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I promise you, no matter how hard it is, you'll never regret starting to introduce AAC. But in a year from now, you may regret not having started in the first place.
So just finally, we've got some resources that we talked about today, and some links that you can visit some different websites. So to make your own core boards, lesson pics, you can kind of create whatever visual you can think of, as well as BoardMaker. BoardMaker is probably a familiar one to people if you're working in a classroom. You can create any kind of visuals any kind of core board or any kind of visuals that would be useful. Practical AAC is a really good website that has a lot of articles and information about different types of AAC and different strategies. Again, the AAC coach, which we've referenced quite a lot in this presentation, that's where you can find her, and she's also on Facebook and Instagram. Assistware is the website for Proloquo to Go, and Assistware has a lot of really good videos that they release all the time. They also have quite an active Facebook group with lots of workshops that they release ever so often. Project Core has good information about core vocabulary and ways that if you wanted to do that strategy of like core word of the week, it has lots of information about core vocabulary. The AAC Language Lab it's like a paid subscription, but they have lesson plans for anybody who is using AAC. Toby Dynavox, again, they have lots of information. They have a lot of workshops that they release, and they're the ones that do TD Snap and the eye gaze systems. And just our next page here. So Attainment Company is where you can find some of the mid-tech systems that we talked about, like the switches. PRC Saltillo do Touch Chat and LAMP. On their website, they also have lots of core boards that you can print. They also have access to free Flip and Talks. So you can go onto their website, you can print a Flip and Talk with lots of different vocabulary arrays, and it has the whole thing ready for you in a template. You just have to print it and laminate it. Bridges Canada, again, has some of the low-tech and the mid-tech AAC systems. Cough Drop is an online AAC vocabulary, which you can go on and have a look at. AbleNet, again, do some of the low-tech and mid-tech, and so does Boundless AT. We also just want to highlight here that if you do want support from a private speech pathologist to do an assessment or introduce any of those things, you can find a private speech pathologist in Ontario through CASAPO, and that's their website there. You can go on and find a speech pathologist, or in Quebec, there's OAQ, which is their website just there. And then we've just provided a bunch of references for you to look at as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you logging on to listen to our workshop. We hope it was helpful. And we will be joining you live to answer some of your questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Retta Hassanen, and I have two kids, two girls. Ilona is 15, and then I have a 11-year-old Lumi and their father, Regis. So Ilona has several diagnoses. Her main diagnosis is called SYNGAP1, which is non-inherited genetic mutation. And it mainly causes symptoms like severe autism in her case, intellectual disability, and a couple of other things, but those are the most visible ones, difficult epilepsy as well. And she is non-speaking, meaning she doesn't really have verbal speech.
My name is Gail Laird. I have worked at Giant Steps for 4 years. I've worked with Ilona for the past 2 years. Ilona in the classroom in the school, Ilona is a very unique, wonderful human being. In the classroom, she's usually very calm. She likes to do her own thing. She likes to do her puzzles, her games. She just goes at her own speed and does what she wants to do. Let's go on the floor.
You want to eat pudding? Let's go get pudding. Come. I'll go get pudding for you. You want to eat pudding? That was a very good one.
We started working on Ilona's communication very early on. I think we started with adapted sign language when she was 20 months, I want to say, very early on, just after her first autism diagnosis. And we moved on from there to PECS, the Pixar exchange system, and then to more high-tech devices. So really early on, from 20 months on. Ilona started PECS, I want to say the whole daycare age, maybe from 2 to 5 years old. And we found it very difficult for her. She advanced quite well to the sentence level. However, the fine motor skills were not there. Working with the Velcros was very difficult. And she couldn't really advance beyond, I want something. I want a sausage. I want... So she was stuck. When she started school at Giant Steps, I think she was 6 years old. We introduced her first high-tech device, and she was on that application, I would say, until 10 years old, so quite many years. However, it didn't have a very robust vocabulary. It was very custom, couple of images only, and to be honest, she kind of plateaued very quickly, and we didn't really manage to integrate it into her daily life. At 10 years old, I really felt like we needed to push something more robust and more long-term, where she could advance for a longer time. And at that point, we were lucky to have an evaluation which app would be good for her. And we were between a couple of choices. Some were too difficult for fine motor skills, were too small the icons. I think that was LAMP. And we ended up choosing Touch Chat Word Power. And today at age 15, she's still on that and progressing all the time. And really, I think she has a lot ways to go with that. Ilona unfortunately does not see a speech therapist or SLP on a regular basis. We have looked and looked. There is a big lack of speech therapists, especially the ones who would know AAC well enough to work with an intermediate user. She doesn't see a speech therapist, and this is a big problem, and she's not alone in this. It's very a shame because many autistic kids have and adults have big communication issues. And we don't have access to AAC services, unfortunately. We have, for example, Pascal, who is a play and behavior specialist who works with Ilona. With her, we've kind of custom made a program where we're teaching Ilona systematically the vocabulary on her device. It has been, in our experience, very useful to advance in a more structured way in teaching her the language, because that's what it really is. It's about teaching her the language. And we had to go really situation by situation, game by game, and really use play as the main method of teaching. And Ilona has done so much progress with Pascal and other who came before her, who were playing with her and teaching her vocabulary one step by step.
Ding dong!
I liked it.
Ding dong!
I wasn't a fan of it. I liked it.
Ding dong!
I wasn't a fan of it.
You're washing the hands? See, look. Who's here? Ding dong! Whoopsie daisy or Tao? Who do we want to come inside the house?
Tao.
You want Tao? Okay. Hi, Ilona. I'm Tao.
I want to tell you
here.
something.
And then you're gonna come in. Wash my hands.
Your turn.
My turn. Okay.
I want to tell you
Okay, it's your
something.
turn. What do you want to tell me?
I went for a boat ride.
Ooh, I like boat
I liked
rides. I like boat rides. See? Now Tao is going to wash hands.
Managing her AAC tool, her device, or we call it Talker, is very easy. Well, it's easier when you have two. I edit on one and she uses the other. I also use one for modeling and she speaks with the other. It is not difficult. I think you get very, very used to it very quickly, and it's essential that you do, and it's also essential that you speak with it. At least in our case, it has been the key to making the use more natural, is that we also use it, we speak with it. And one very effective thing we've seen by us using it is, for example, in an emotional dysregulation moment, if I tell her how we can get out of it, she can calm down with her device, she believes it more than my spoken words. She has more faith in the device than her mom.
Would you like to ride a bike?
You want to go ride a bike?
Go ride a bike.
Yeah?
Say something? You were swimming. When was that?
Swimming. I was swimming.
You like it?
I was swimming.
All right.
Ilona uses her talker in the classroom. Usually when she has a need or a want, she'll use it to ask us to help her with her water bottle. She'll use it when she wants help to turn over her puzzle. She'll use it to let us know that she wants to eat a snack. It's usually to communicate a need or a want. All the team members in the classroom use Ilona's AAC to model and also to communicate with Ilona. So sometimes if we verbally tell Ilona something, it doesn't have as big an impact as if we were to use her talker and say, wash hands. If the talker says wash hands, it means it's time to wash hands for Ilona.
Open.
Okay, I'm gonna help you open the door.
Ilona's journey with AAC has been long. She started at under 2 years old, and where we are today, I find it's incredible. I think we could have definitely done better, but she, in the last 5 years, since being on a robust vocabulary, she has really skyrocketed in her ability to not just request things, but to tell us how she's feeling, share about her day, joke, a big thing that I never thought was possible, that she would want to make us laugh and share a joke with her, even though it's sometimes very repetitive, but that's okay. Yeah, that's been her journey. I hope that her journey just keeps going on. The big challenge we do have is that Ilona has extremely hard time generalizing any skills. Anything she learns from home, she doesn't know it outside of home. Anything she learns in the car, she will not know it in her bedroom, and forth. So we've had to really take a very systematic approach in teaching her this language, and at the same time learning it ourselves. With AAC, we've managed to have that shared attention that you look in developing communication. So it has been a life-changing for her, for sure, and also for our family. When we work with school, it is definitely challenging for the reason is that Ilona has really hard time transferring her skills. What she learns at home, she doesn't automatically take to school with her. So the best way that I've managed to share with school is really about sharing what Ilona can do. We actually film her when she does progress with her AAC device, when she learns a new word. I film it, I send it to a teacher, and he immediately knows what she can do and can reinforce that skill at school. So really the communication sharing, and even with videos, so they see in what situation this happened and how she can do it, has been helpful. School takes a lot of pictures of her day and send them to me during the day. And that evening, I can have a conversation with Ilona by showing her the picture. Look, today you did arts and crafts or whatever it is that they did. I can show her and we can create a conversation about that.
The talker in my workload, I actually find it can make my workload less in terms of having Ilona be a part of the classroom and having an open communication with her. So if we're using the tablet, I can often get her engaged in an activity by using her talker to, if we're doing math, we can use the talker to do numbers. Art, we use colors. There's lots of ways that we can use Ilona's talker to draw her into the activities in the classroom. And also as a way to play with Ilona, we'll do jokes on the talker. She has certain buttons that she likes to push more than others, which means she's in a playful mood or she wants to engage with us in a different kind of way. Within the classroom, the other children are also very interested when Ilona uses her talker. Some of them would like to watch what she's doing. Sometimes the students want to touch her talker to also speak to Ilona, which we try to model appropriate communication with the talker. Ilona's parents are fantastic. They're always open to coming in and meeting with the team when there's new things to learn about. There's always open communication about new buttons that have been added to her talker. If we have questions or concerns with the way Ilona is using her talker, her mom is always very open to answering those questions and engaging with us. And they're very active in having Ilona use all the tools available to her to communicate and to help us help Ilona use her tools.
In the future, I really wish that Ilona can become more and more natural with her AAC use. I also hope that she can communicate with more and more people, not just her parents or her teacher, but that she can really bring it to all the environments that she goes to, because in the future she'll probably be a little less at home. I also hope that our community becomes more and more used to the AAC devices and more comfortable with them, and it becomes a normal thing in the neurodivergent community.
Goodbye. I want help, but goodbye, see you later.
Hi, Pamela. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us now live and taking our questions. So our first question for you, we would like to know if you had any comments on the testimonial that we just watched.
Yeah, sorry, give us 1 second. We're just fixing our Zoom here. We're good? Yep. Yeah, we thought it was fantastic. So we want to say thank you so much to Retta and Ilona and her family and the school team and the therapy team that participated in the testimonial. We thought it was great and a really great example of AAC in everyday life. You could tell in the testimonial that Ilona's family really value AAC and have made AAC a part of their everyday life. You can see that when they took their device out for a walk with the bike, which is exactly what we would recommend, that the device should go everywhere, and it should go everywhere besides maybe the pool and the bath, but that it just goes everywhere with the child throughout every environment. So that was perfect. Being able to talk about how she uses robust vocabulary and robust AAC, and that it takes time and commitment and I guess commitment from everybody to be modeling as much as possible. Retta mentioned that she can be a little bit repetitive sometimes with the device and make repetitive jokes, and that's totally fine. I mean, even as neurotypical speaking adults, sometimes we can say things over and over again and make repetitive jokes. I know when I FaceTime my family back home, my dad, who is a neurotypical speaking adult, says the same jokes over and over again, and we laugh every time. So that's totally fine. I think it's having access to lots of other types of vocabulary gives the potential to expand on that repetitive requests. But yeah, it was really great to see, and we thank them so much for sharing their story, and yeah, just being able to see a learner use her device in action was great.
Wonderful. Our next question is, what would you do to adapt AACs for individuals with intellectual disabilities?
Honestly, I can't really think of anything I would change when dealing with individuals with intellectual disabilities, because we're mainly following their lead and working at their level. So some of the questions that we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, like what if they don't understand cause and effect? What if they don't understand enough language? Those same answers would apply. We would continue to model motivating and routine-based vocabulary and model as much as we can without expectations. We would give them the time to explore and follow their lead. So all those ideas would apply to anyone using a device, whether or not there's an intellectual disability. The only potential modifications we may make is if there were any physical access challenges affecting their ability to see, hear, or touch a device. But really, every individual with AAC is going to progress at different speeds. So it's just really important to meet them at whatever stage they're at and maintain the consistency with the modeling and all the other strategies we discussed.
Perfect, thank you. The next question is, can an AAC system be set up without a speech language pathologist who has carried out an assessment?
Yeah, so it's best to do an assessment with a speech pathologist, but if one isn't readily available, starting with a robust low-tech system is definitely better than nothing. But we wouldn't necessarily recommend spending a lot of money on a device without an assessment to confirm that it's the best option.
Thank you. Next question. Do you have any specific advice for students who attend the class with 20, 25 other children? Many of the tips given seems more applicable in a small ratio class, like 5 to 7 students.
Yeah, so we know it can be difficult when there are a lot of kids in the classroom. Many strategies can be used in the class. So the same strategies like having a big vocabulary board on the wall, having sentence strips around the classroom, maybe even getting some of the other kids who don't use AAC involved. So for peer reading or another activity, children really love to help out. So if some time is taken to show some of the other children how they can communicate with AAC, they can all take turns modeling with that student. So we know that the child may not have one-to-one support in that classroom, but the main thing is that the device is readily accessible and it's used throughout the day. And the worst case scenario is they may not get as much modeling as they may be getting at home, but at least they still have access to their voice all day.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question. Could AAC be used by students with selective mutism or anxiety?
Yeah, so there's no reason why an AAC system couldn't be used by a kid with selective mutism or anxiety. It's not, I guess, working with kids with selective mutism isn't really in our scope of practice because it's not really a communication issue. So if a kid did present with selective mutism or anxiety, it would be best to consult with a psychologist who might have the skills to, more of the skill set to work with that child. I guess the concern would be is if a child did have selective mutism, that they're not wanting to communicate, that giving them an AAC system, they might do the same thing on their AAC system. So they might not want to communicate with verbal speech or with AAC. So you might come up with that same, the same hesitancy to want to communicate. But in theory, no, in theory, you could use the device with a kid with those diagnoses, but it would be best to consult with a psychologist.
Okay, great. So should language precursors such as turn-taking, shared attention, and communication intent be taught before or during the use of AAC?
So they should really be taught during the use of AAC. So the same way we don't wait for a child to have those precursors before we speak to them, we don't need them to have them in place before starting AAC. And AAC also really gives them a mean to learn these precursors in a way that they can understand.
Should the use of AAC be mastered before use in class where educators have little time with each student?
Yeah, so no, not really. So kids spend a lot of time in school. Monday to Friday, they're there for 8 hours a day. So that's a big chunk of the day where they could be getting aided language input. If we think back to the start of the presentation where we had that graphic about, if we were only introduce AAC for 40 to 60 minutes a week, that it would take like 84 years for a kid to learn the system. If a child was just using their system at home, it would take a lot longer for a kid or adult, anybody, to gain proficiency. It is also important for the kid to have their device in every environment. So like in the testimonial, when they went for a bike ride, the device went with them. Likewise, we would want the device to go everywhere, and going into school is a really big part of that. It could also be really frustrating for an AAC user if they are a proficient AAC user and they don't have access to their voice or at school. So no, a child doesn't have to master it. We do recognize, though, how busy classrooms can be. And it is kind of easy for us to say, like, just do it at school. It can be really tricky. And we're hoping today that we were able to give some school teams some suggestions about ways that they can incorporate AAC into like small little pieces throughout the day until it just becomes a part of the routine. But we do acknowledge that classrooms are very busy. And you could also use SLPs to support in finding the best ways to integrate an AAC system into the classroom if you have access to an AAC, if you have access to a speech pathologist. And also using the parents as well. Parents are often the experts on their kids' systems and the expert on their kid in general. So using parents' expertise in ways that they can incorporate the device and give some ideas about using the device at school.
Laura, is it your turn?
Okay, yeah, wonderful, thank you. Could you give us an example of, can you give us a visual example of motor planning?
Yes. Oversight on our part that we didn't include that in that slide. So this is an example of I hope everyone can see this, and sorry, I'm just putting this in front of Pam's face for the moment. This is the low-tech board that we used in the example with Riley. So this is a low-tech printout based on TD Snap. So this kind of shows, I'll bring it right up to the screen. The idea is that the symbols stay in the same spot at all times. So it's not Velcroed. We're not moving the different symbols around to test that the child knows exactly what the symbols mean. They stay in the exact same spot. And in this particular system, it's all color-coded as well. So you've got questions in blue, you've got pronouns in yellow, you've got verbs in green. So it's all color-coded. But the idea is, for motor planning purposes, the symbols stay in the same spot because the way that the child learns it is through repetition. So in that example, when we were doing a Play-Doh activity with Riley, she really isn't going to be learning go by looking for the green arrow and knowing that the arrow means go. She's really going to learn it through over and over and over again. I point to there and then something fun happens. I point to there and then Pam says go. I point to there and I can go somewhere. So it's just that repetition over and over and over again, which is how kids learn symbols. But this is just an example of motor planning, that everything stays in the same spot. There are lots of high-tech AAC apps as well that have principles of motor planning. So like in LAMP, so that stands for Language Acquisition Through Motor Planning. It's a big principle of their app. In LAMP, the symbols stay in the same spot. So if you go into a category with music, the verb will be in the same spot. If you go into a different category with body parts, the main verb will be in the same spot. So it doesn't matter what the verb is, what the verb or the symbol is, that verb will be in the exact same spot on the screen. So the child knows through repetition, I need to press this button, second row down, second to the left, or whatever it is, to find the verb. And we did mention throughout the presentation the importance of motor planning. We kind of learned so many things through motor planning. We learned typing through motor planning. We learned texting through motor planning, driving through motor planning. Repetition is super important.
Great. So what if there are multiple programs, multiple types of AACs being used in the classroom, high tech, low tech, everything?
Yeah, so all the strategies for AAC and modeling are the same. So regardless of the device or the program, or if it's high tech or low tech, it's really about the communication partner being comfortable and familiar with each tool. So with each high-tech program or low-tech tool, and knowing how to navigate each to find specific words. So we definitely recognize it could be difficult when there are a lot of different things going on in the classroom. But it's really just kind of giving yourself the grace and the time to become comfortable with each profile. And some of the strategies that Amanda mentioned in the presentation, so even if you just find like a keyword, and then you work on, today I'm going to learn where the word go is on this tool and this tool and this tool, and slowly just build up your knowledge of each system so that you can model appropriately.
Thank you. So there are a few hands that are raised in the chat. We're not going to take questions by hand raising. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat. Our next question is, what do you do when the classroom teacher doesn't want to use the device? How do you get their buy-in?
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge. And even Pam and I do this every day, and it can definitely be a challenge getting buy-in. The more people on the team that can advocate for the child, the better. Sometimes it's really just a barrier of it being a bit overwhelming for a team, particularly if they've got a new AAC user. It might just be that introducing AAC might seem a bit daunting. We're hoping that in the presentation today, that was our main goal really, was to make AAC use a little bit less daunting and a little bit more accessible to everyone. So I guess the main thing, if there is difficulty with buy-in, is just trying to create some really small steps to success for the team. And like I said before, that might be using the parents as the experts in their child, and using, knowing their device and the device use at home, sending in some videos of the child using their device at home, setting out like again, some of those strategies that we talked about in the presentation, like having a core word of the week, or having one word to focus on throughout the week while everybody's starting to get started. We recognize classrooms are busy. It can be difficult if you have an AAC user and you're a teacher who's not as familiar with AAC. But again, one of our messages of this presentation is to just give it a go. It doesn't have to be perfect in modeling. It's just trying to model as often as you can, but we do recognize that it can really be difficult if there is not buy-in from the team. Just having a chat with the teacher sometimes about like, what is the biggest barrier? Is it that you don't have enough information? Is it that you don't have enough time? Is it that you don't have support from professional staff like a speech pathologist or an OT? So trying to brainstorm that way. It's not really a perfect solution, because difficulties with buy-in definitely still happens, but trying to have some little bite-sized manageable pieces to implement AAC into the classroom and involving the family as the experts on their child might be somewhere to start.
Is it okay with the dedicated communication device to also use educational apps as like for reading?
So it's really best if the communication device does remain a dedicated communication device, because we want the child to always have access to their voice. So if they have other programs on an iPad that they're using, they have no way to use the program and their voice at the same time, which means they pretty much can't communicate about what they're doing or about anything else at that time. So it's definitely ideal if they had a different device for that. We recognize that's not always possible. So if they really do need to be on the same system, it's really important that the child can independently switch back to their communication app, so they can access their voice when they want. And that could be, the child's, physically navigating back to the app. It can also be even just like a little visual on their table that's, a picture of the app, or shows that, if they touch this, then their partner should go back to the app. So as long as they do have a way of getting back to their words, then again, it's not ideal, but it's definitely a better solution.
Great. Could you explain to us the differences or advantages compared to sign language?
Yeah, so sign language is a type of AAC. It's kind of difficult to compare like an AAC app and sign language because they are so different and they're kind of different languages. There are pros and cons to, like we said, there's pros and cons to all of the different systems. I guess sign language relies, though, on the communication partner knowing sign language. I found that even moving here in Australia, we have different signs than we might have in Canada. Some of the sign language is a little bit different, even in English across different places in the world. So if I don't know that particular sign language, the communication might break down. But if you have an AAC system, which has voice output, if I speak English, I will be able to understand some of the symbols. So even if I don't understand what the actual symbol means, if there is voice output, I can still participate in an interaction with that AAC user, even if I'm not familiar with their device. So they are very different. It's kind of hard to compare, but yeah, I guess when we're talking about an AAC app, the AAC app gives a user voice across space.
Great. Okay. And most recently, we got another question. And so it says, would the approach be different in using AAC with an adult newly diagnosed with some type of aphasia? And if so, how would it be different?
Not really. So just full disclosure, AAC, aphasia with adults is not our area of expertise. We mainly work with children. But in theory, not really. The vocabulary would just need to be tailored to the adult. So obviously, if you were to open Proloquo to Go, there's on the homepage, there's a lot of play and toys and things like that, which might not be appropriate for an adult with aphasia. So it's more about how the vocabulary being relevant and motivating and important for an adult. But you could use it the same with being able to model and showing the adult different symbols that they could use. Again, aphasia is so different because there's all different types of aphasia. So it really depends on the adult and what their aphasia presents like. But in theory, yes, adults can use an AAC system.
We're going to go back to small children now. So I have a question. So I have a 3-year-old who has an iPad with Proloquo to Go who goes to daycare. The other children in her group are very intrigued and want to touch her iPad. What do you suggest to do with their children in her group?
So every kid is different. And it really depends on the kid. So we've worked with some kids that are very happy for us to model on their device and very happy for other kids to model on the device, and some kids not so much, and they don't want you to touch their device, which is totally fine. And we want to respect that. So it really depends. I mean, if the child is okay with other kids interacting with their system, then that's okay. If they're visually upset and are saying no, stop, then obviously we respect that. We find that sometimes, particularly in classrooms and in daycare, it's a bit of a novelty to start with. And then when the other kids see that it's not just a game and it's for a purpose, that novelty kind of tends to wear off, not as an across the board rule or anything, but you do find that the novelty wears off a little bit. But I mean, if they're interested in the device, that's great, because we want kids to be able to interact and have a conversation and be interested in hearing what the AAC user has to say. If it becomes an issue, you could kind of set some boundaries in place. So you could say, okay, this is, I don't know, Johnny's talker. We don't touch Johnny's talker. Johnny uses it to talk with us. You can use it if you get permission from Johnny, or you could have a low-tech printout of that child's device so that the other kids can point to the symbols and still have a back and forth conversation using the iPad. But it depends. It really depends on the kid. It depends on the classroom. I know that's a very vague answer, but it depends on the kid. It depends on the classroom setup. But I guess the main message there is to respect the wishes of the AAC user. And if the AAC user says absolutely no way, then it's absolutely no way. And we find another way to model for the other kids to interact with the vocabulary without touching the kid's device.
Those are great advices. Another question. How do you feel about a general AAC device available to all students in a classroom? As in, there's one AAC device in the class and any students can use it if they want or need to.
Yep, I can go. So it's best practice to have a dedicated device for a child. Again, we know classrooms are busy. We know sometimes resources are tight. We've certainly worked with some classrooms that have just a general iPad that they can model vocabulary for kids if a child doesn't have access to robust AAC. Like example of the call board on the wall, a child doesn't have to have that particular language system to be able to access the call board on the wall. I'm not sure if, Pascal, you mean by that question having the same app across the board with all of the kids, or just one dedicated system?
I think it's only one in the classroom that any children can use. That's what I understood from the question.
Yeah, okay. If that's the situation, it's best if a child can have their own like obviously this is best case scenario, right? Like we know that funding and accessibility and all those things are issues, but if you were to have one iPad that was shared between a whole class, you're going to get a lot of fights there. And you're also not going to get enough time for a child to be able to master the iPad. So, like I've worked with some classrooms that they have a dedicated board, I guess, like a low-tech board like this, that might be at the front of the classroom to model, but it's not for every single child to use. It might be to model in circle time. But best practice is, in an ideal situation, every child should really have their own device.
And if the question was to be like, if all of the children would have the same, the same app, what would be your advices?
Yeah, so again, everything kind of really, because every kid is so different, it's best really to have an app tailored to that particular kid. So I know that can be tricky in classrooms if you have lots of different apps and you've got a class of 30 kids and you've got a bunch of different apps. But it is important for a child to have their own dedicated language system, even if that means in the classroom you have different profile users, because there are pros and cons to, like I said, to all of the apps. And sometimes we have our own biases about apps that we like, and the kid might not like it. I think I said this in the presentation, but, sometimes I'll go in, we do device trials with kids, and I'll go in and thinking to myself, okay, this child is going to love touch chat. They're just going to fly with touch chat. And then the kid will immediately get out of touch chat and go into LAMP because there's something about LAMP that makes more sense to them and they like using LAMP. So if we say across the board to the kids, like, no, you can't use LAMP, you have to use, I don't know, Proloquo to Go or something, we're taking that like motivation and need and the things that they want for their AA system away a little bit. So I know it can be easier for the staff to model the same language system, but to get around that, and I think we maybe talked about this before, is it's just being familiar with the devices. I know it's hard trying to manage lots of different systems, but it's about, as the staff working with the child, just spending some time and getting to know the layout of the device, spending some time as a team, practicing and modeling different vocab, like, pick a few different words and figure out how to learn it on touch chat and then on TD Snap and then on Proloquo to Go. Again, this is like a best case scenario if you have access to all of those apps, but you can also have access to all those low tech systems that you can find online too. But it's really just about comfortability and familiarity with the vocabulary. Once, as the communication partner, you become more fluent with where everything is, it's much easier to kind of code switch between different devices. When you're brand new, it takes a lot more brain power in trying to figure out where everything is, but the more familiar you are with it, spending some time away from the kid if possible and learning where all the pathways are and giving yourself a bit of grace to learn, and just jump, like we've said before, just jump in and give it a go. But it is kind of best practice for the kid to have their own dedicated language profile.
Great. Thank you so much, Pamela and Amanda, for answering all the questions. That is all the time that we have. We are going to move on to our sort of closing pieces. So we just wanted to thank you so much for a wonderful webinar today. Pascal?
Yes, we had great remarks from everyone. So
thank you. No, thanks for having us. We love talking about AAC. So thanks for signing on, and we just hope that we made AAC a little bit less daunting and a bit more accessible, and just jump in and give it a go. I guess that's our take home message.
You sure did.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to do a recap of our activity of today. So we learned so much tips and tricks on AAC. It was really interesting to me. I learned so much. And we learned about like how to get AAC in home settings and in school and even plenty of other settings. And I remember that AAC doesn't have to be rigid and complicated. We only have to get into it and have fun. So that's what I'm getting back from this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. So if you want to know more about Irene Tessa's activity, so you can go on our website and you'll be finding this activity in our website and many other more.
Thanks for that recap, Pascal. It was a wonderful webinar. I would like to thank the technical team at the Geneva Center for Autism and the Sonderly team for recording today's webinar. If you would like to learn more about Sonderly's courses, please visit our website at sonderly.io.